Let's do it. Hello and welcome to the Josh and Tyler Show. I'm your host, Josh. I'm here with Tyler Wolf with 2S for fucking fantastic. Funtastic, I guess, is I got that all wrong.
I'll take it.
Any short, fucking fantastic is the new phrase. That's what they call every Disney Plus only release.
Oh,
Funtastic.
Yeah, whatever.
Almost as fun as Fun Size, this stupid Halloween movie I watched a long time ago that for some reason I can never forget.
Oh, God. You saw that?
Yes, I saw that, and I've never been able to unsee it. It's weird, and I don't know, but that's not what we're talking about today. Thankfully, we're talking about, as suggested on our Nonsense show. If you haven't seen our Nonsense show for side characters in TV, film, anime, etc., check that out. Lots of great stuff. Jim Rash making a honorable appearance there, as well as community cast as the Dean. Today we're talking about the most beautiful animated movies of all time. Now, when we say beautiful, this does not mean it's necessarily perfect in every conception. It could be hand-drawn, it could be claymation, it could be stop motion, it could be pretty much anything that you can imagine that's not a live action actor in front of a film. Now, these are complete films. As much as we wanted to include segments of Mary Poppins, that's only part of a film with an animated sequence, or Bedknobs and Broomsticks is only part of an animated sequence. Very well done, but still part. So these are whole films that focus on a distinctive style of animation. Now, I know, Tyler, this was, you have a lot of honorable mentions, so you should just jump right into this. I want to hear what you got on the list that didn't make the cut.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you didn't have to point out to me not to put live action animation hybrids. Although one of these days, maybe we should talk about those at some point, because that would be
a list for another.
There are some good ones. There are some bad ones. There's one that we can't mention because it's not available because Disney made a huge boo-boo. I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, fun fact about that. I was watching the many Adventures of Robin Hood as Merry Men. It's a 1952. It's before they made the Adventures of Robin Hood show with Richard Green. And in that, they said "Wonderful World of Disney," and they just, they showed a clip of that in 1952, and they played Zippity Doo Dah. I'm like, oh boy.
Well, I mean, that's one of the few salvageable parts of that movie. Like, I've seen the first half hour of it, and I gotta be honest, even if they didn't make a boo-boo, it would still be a bad and incredibly boring movie.
Yeah.
Those animated bits were the only redeeming quality.
My babysitters brought that one over as a kid, and I fell asleep, so... This was 1996. No one gave a flying fuck about anything.
I miss those days. And I was
my babysitters were, how they forced Disney down my throat, and all I wanted was Scooby-Doo. So, I didn't really pay too much attention, unless it was Oliver and Company, which is delightful. So what do you got for honorable mentions for best animated film?
Okay, so man, this list just goes on and on. So I'm going to try and list these as best as I can. Moana, I think, is one of Disney's most photorealistic films in regards to the textures of the characters, and as well as just capturing beautiful landscapes, the ocean sides in particular. Just show those on a blank screen and people might mistake them for a legitimate ocean. That's how great the rendering on the animation is, for sure. The Wind Rises, you know how much I enjoy this. It's one of my favorite Hayao Miyazaki movies. It has some of the most crisp looking moments of color throughout an entire Ghibli film. There's another movie that I think executes it a lot better, and you're going to find that one out. Howl's Moving Castle is surprisingly an honorable mention. It was a really tough toss-up between this and my other Ghibli pick, and we'll get more into that later on. But Howl's Moving Castle blends the 2D characters, the 3D moving castle that looks exactly like you would expect Miyazaki to do. Very steampunk, very ugly and grotesque looking because it's an industrial machine compared to the beauty of nature and all that stuff that you would expect from him. I too would
like to chime in on Howl's Moving Castle here, because this is on my honorable mentions as well.
Really?
I do appreciate Howl's Moving Castle quite a bit. It is my favorite Ghibli movie besides Princess Mononoke. I like the castle, and I like a lot of the animation. I just think the ugly old lady is just too ugly at points.
No, trust me, I've seen uglier. In fact, yesterday I saw a movie that was 10 times as uglier, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit about
But I
that
just think that it's an honorable mention for me because one thing that goes along with beautiful animation is great sound design. And I think it has great sound design, but the version that people watch and the version that you can get available most times is the English dub. And I don't like the English dub. I don't like Billy Crystal's A Fireplace. It really takes.
I'm sorry, what?
I prefer the original Japanese version. I don't like dubbed things. I like the original with how it sounds. I will read the subtitles. To me, that adds more context.
Look, I don't have a problem reading subtitles. It's just the Disney dubs, not all of them are good. The Castle in the Sky one is just crap.
I haven't seen the Castle in the Sky, but I mean, for me, like Ponyo, the dub is not good. I prefer the Japanese. Howl's Moving Castle, I prefer the Japanese. Princess Mononoke, I 100% prefer the Japanese. That's where I'm at. The only one I'll say that I like in the English is My Neighbor Totoro, because that one for me has always been hard to access. So for me, the English dub helps me understand the film a little bit more. But then I always go back to the Japanese dub because I really want to appreciate the origin of the art. But
that's fair. So, like for me, yeah. The Ponyo dub, like all the celebrities in it are completely fine. It's just that Noah Cyrus and Frankie Jonas just didn't have acting experience beforehand, and this was their introduction, and this probably just wasn't the best start for them. And
the only voice in Ponyo I think really fit that you could have kept in either dub was Liam Neeson as the underwater dude who kidnapped all. I
want to say yes to that, but at the same time, like I don't know how Liam Neeson's design fits like a rainbow suit. But at the same time, I can't imagine who else would play him. That's the tough part.
I mean, it's still better than the time he played Zeus in Wrath of the Titans.
I'll just take your word for it on that. But
no, I enjoyed the reboot of Clash and Wrath of the Titans. They're silly. They're over the top. They're nothing amazing. They're not high art cinema. But Liam Neeson as Zeus sort of was not great. But yeah, no, I prefer, because what they do when they do the dubs is the sound design in the background sort of gets minimalized. So any sounds of fire or war doesn't feel as strong or poignant in the dubs. So you want the subs because you can still hear all the original in-depth sound design they have, because the voices take more precedent over the background sound.
Well, I mean, based on the celebrity factor, maybe, but maybe it's because I can already sidestep that it doesn't really bug me all that much.
When I started watching them, I watched them in Japanese first.
Yeah, I get that. So, I get that.
That's me. Anyway, continue with your honorable mentions.
Yeah, so I don't talk a lot about stop motion on my channel, but one of the few that I definitely have a ton of respect for and admiration for is Kubo and the Two Strings. Not enough people saw that one, which I really don't understand, but that's a completely different topic in and of itself. But it does feature a lot of really swift and cool action scenes, which you don't associate stop motion with action just based on how fucking time consuming all of it is. But they put in the extra effort, and it really goes to show because it looked absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, Kubo was amazing.
Yeah. In regards to Pixar movies, Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., and Up all have really standout moments, even in the originals where some of the toys looked really convincing, but the humans and the animals, they had to improve on that in the sequels, but they did get better over time. And Up has that married life montage, and that alone, that could have been its own live action short because it was just so beautiful, and they find ways to make mundane life, as repetitive as it is, look just as exciting every single time, because they used a lot of match cuts to like show the before and after of how these people have learned from their married experiences and from their careers. And there's just so much I could go for that alone compared to the rest of the movie, which is also why it wasn't an honorable mention. The Red Turtle has the very tough accomplishment of telling an entire story with no words whatsoever. And it did a fantastic job with that. The island that he's on is full of lush green forest imagery. The ocean looks beautiful. The Red Turtle itself, I don't want to say that much about it because you say the slightest thing about the story and it becomes spoiled for the rest of it. So
that's still a recent film. That was like 2016, 2017 or something.
2017. Yeah. I love both The Incredibles because
I just wanted to chime in on Kubo. I think Kubo was one of the most unique films that I had seen from the studio, because they did the Box Trolls as well, which I watched, and I thought, it's not a bad little film. It's very unique.
It's all right.
It does its thing. It gave me Caroline vibes with the Box Trolls. which is a very unique film as well. I'd like to throw out there. But I think Toy Story 2 gets my honorable mention over Toy Story because I think Toy Story itself is very groundbreaking with its first CG, and Bug's Life did that and followed up. But that's sort of an ugly movie at points with the edges and the curves. As much as I love A Bug's Life, one of my favorite Pixar movies because that's like the first one I saw, and I liked Hopper back in the day. I did not know who voiced him, but whatever, it's in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
I liked Hopper. I liked the bugs. I liked the circus act. It was just really quirky. It was fun. I liked the ladybug characters. Like,
Dennis Slayer is the ladybug.
I'm a ladybug. Like, I one of my favorite Pixar moments of all time is don't go into the light, Jim. No. Like, just a lot of stuff I like in there. But I think Toy Story 2 was the first one to really make it smooth and make it accessible. And that's the first movie I saw in theaters. So for me, that's sort of as much as I love the first Toy Story, I've really come to appreciate it in recent years because it's a very good film. And I like how dark and twisted it is. I like Toy Story 2 better, not only because it's the first one I saw, but I think the story's better. I know people say it's scattered. I really love the I am your father bit. People just say there's too much going on. They don't like Toy Story 2. And I'm like, you know what? I love this movie. So
it didn't get in the way of anything.
I like the Owl's Toy Barn. I like the collector. I like the miner. I like the introduction of Jessie, which is a really neat side character. We get those moments. I think the animation is particularly well done in the elevator when Buzz is fighting Zorg, because that's really well done. And I don't think I've ever quite seen anything like that on Disney animation before. Like the sort of realism mixed with the CG, because the ping pong balls or little projectile things he's shooting look very real as opposed to the background of the elevator that's CG, but with these characters sort of in this 2D sort of pop out, this false 2D that they managed to create this sense there. And the toy store looks really big, and they really start to expand the world. And the way the truck smoke works at the gas station, just everything, there's just little touches that really make this feel alive, and this could be a real world. And Andy's room just has a lot more dimension and depth to it. And
so does Andy, oddly enough.
I think the biggest improvement for this entire film is the toy soldiers look really, really real in this. They look like it's a toy soldier in your room that could come to life. Then you also mentioned Up. I think the first 10 minutes of Up is some of the best animation and storytelling that you will ever see. Very little words, but I think the rest of the film suffers from a talking dog named Doug. I will say I love sidekicks. I think that Eddie Murphy's Mushu is great. I like the sidekick of Donkey. I think it works well in Tarzan, surprisingly, because I think Tarzan's sidekicks are really fun and quirky, along with the music and the animation.
When they're there.
This is the first time I really noticed the Disney trope. I'm like, no, you need to stop with the talking animals. I just think Doug distracts from the story. I just want to see the relationship between the boy and the old man. But that first 10 minutes,
yeah, but you get it, though. Sure. You still have it.
Yeah, I just don't care about the second half of the movie. So, but yeah, you had so many honorable mentions coming at me. I had to, jump on them.
Well, I've still got a few more, bear with me on this one. The Incredibles, again, because action set pieces in a Pixar movie are really hard to come by, and they do such a good job at that. Plus, the way they portray everyone's individual superpowers in a specific fashion is done extremely well, especially with the second one. Once they expanded upon Jack's powers, whichever
Jack has the best sequence in the number 2 with the raccoon. That is a great sequence. I think the first movie is really, really good, and I like the animation. I think the second one improves on the animation, but tells a lot of similar stories, but adds some very unique sequences, specifically with Jack and Samuel L. Jackson's Frozone.
I was going to say Elastigirl because they give her so much more to do, and they give her more ways to literally expand.
Yeah, I'm on a Sam Jackson kick. I watched Jackie Brown last night. So
that's a good one.
And yeah, I was probably going to do Pulp Fiction tonight. I like Sam Jackson in it. I like him a lot. He's cool. He's a cool dude.
And I'm just going to skim for the last few that I have on this list. Atlantis and the Lost Empire, filmed on 70 millimeter, has a gigantic scope, some really awesome set pieces. The finale in the volcano is just absolutely awesome, no matter how many times I watch it. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, I really wanted to put on this list because the scope is absolutely massive. It's on a
Yes.
Beauty and the Beast level. And in fact, I'm pretty sure it was made by the same guys who made Beauty and the Beast, but
Yeah, it might
they
have been like that.
expand a lot on the camera movements where it will start on a wide shot of Quasimodo and zoom out to basically the outside of Paris where you can barely see the cathedral. And then it keeps going down into the slums. And I just sat there and I went, you couldn't get away with any of these shots in a Disney movie nowadays. That's top notch level stuff. And of course, Beauty and the Beast would have to be an honorable mention because they were the original ones to really use those movements to create something cinematic, like the ballroom sequence where it starts off in a wide and it's moving along with the characters as they're dancing. And it's such an incredibly seamless and colorful shot. The Little Mermaid is an honorable mention just because of how colorful it is, because it was the very last Disney movie to use actual celluloid to hand draw their stuff. The rest was scanned into a computer, and it works out really well, especially with my last honorable mention, Fantasia 2000, which I would say is better than the original because they experiment with different types of animation, different stories, different types of music. And on top of that, it's less pretentious. It's more cartoony in a way that doesn't always work, especially with the celebrity guests that they hire. It's rare for me to say that Penn and Teller should not be there because I love Penn and Teller, but they shouldn't have done it.
So to answer your question, Beauty and the Beast, Atlantis: The Lost Empire, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame are directed by Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise. So all three the same people there.
Got it.
I was going to put Fantasia on here, but I knew you would have. Anyone who knows Tyler knows he likes Fantasia.
Hey, I watched it a lot as a kid at my babysitter's house. I don't know why. She always seemed to put that one on, of all things.
Hey, you know what? It's not a bad choice. It's got some of the most unique segments in Disney history.
Oh yeah, especially the Gershwin number where everyone's in Depression, New York, and they got Rhapsody in Blue. Like that was the thing I remembered as a kid because it just stuck out to me the most.
Yeah, the one thing that stuck out to me in Hunchback and Beauty and the Beast is the realistic backgrounds with the sort of hand-drawn characters, the way they integrated a little bit of computer and mostly hand-drawn to really make this sort of medium. And I will say, first off, I think Beauty and the Beast I think it's pretty cool. I'm not the hugest fan in the world, but I like the music. I think it's a pretty cool movie. I think Hunchback suffers from a lot of character, a lack of character, and but I love some of the overdramatic songs. The priest song he sings, I just don't feel connected to the Hunchback of Notre Dame story in any version. I just don't think it's a very well done story. So
knowing Disney, I can't really see that of working out if they stuck to how Fable.
Yeah, because I like the sequences in the tower, and I very much you froze, Tyler. You still there? Tyler. Well, let's see. Anyway, but I like the sequences in the tower, and I like the I like Esmeralda. I just don't care about like the carnival bits or like the over corporate government corruption. I'm more interested in the story between the two of them. I just think some of the musical numbers are great. The Tarkin gargoyles are actually a highlight of the film for me, but I just think it's a little messy at points. I know people love it, but it just feels like a messy film storytelling wise. There's just a lot going on.
Well, I mean, it's kind of that thing with Toy Story 2. Everyone says it's jumbled, but I would argue that it makes it a lot more exciting and more interesting. And because those characters are so likable, and it doesn't matter. You can tell me that it doesn't always nail the more dramatic moments, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But for me, it's just the effort and the fact that Disney had the balls to do it. Because let's face it, let's face it, as much as I love Disney properties, they don't really have their balls anymore. In fact, I would dare say after this show has ended, they especially don't have them anymore because this show actually took a few chances.
Yeah, I mean, the people you hired for DuckTales is quite impressive.
Oh, yeah.
I know we talk about the cast a lot, but Kate Micucci from Garfunkel and Oates, a R-rated girl comedy ukulele band, Jim Rash, who's a writer and dramatic actor who plays a dean in community college, which is quite, edgy for a network because of the content they comment on, but it's not edgy in the way they do it. So there is that... it'd be like if you hired Seth Rogen to be in the next live action Disney movie. Like it'd be just very odd and out there because it could be really good, but it might not fit their values of never talking about anything except for love and kindness and being happy and go lucky about it.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because Seth Rogen and his writing partner Evan Goldberg have been hired to executive produce the Darkwing Duck reboot for Disney
Yeah, I'm
Plus.
okay with that. That sounds good.
I would be okay with that, but if I'm being honest, I'm starting to think that Seth Rogen's turning into a real ass kisser in regards to not taking chances anymore.
Well, I mean, I don't know Seth Rogen, so I can't say. I will throw out a couple honorable mentions here. Big Hero 6, I think, is particularly beautiful in the way it portrays the cities, the characters, and Baymax. And I think it's a really cool sort of superhero movie without being like too marvelly and in your face. I like the Stan Lee cameo. I think there's some really charming side characters, but most of all, it looks very smooth, very polished. This very futuristic city. It looks really beautiful. It's a beautiful movie overall. The Beatles' Yellow Submarine is one of the most weird 2D animated hand drawn acid trips that you will ever see. I felt like that the Beatles got in the studio, wrote a script, recorded one take of everything, then put their trippy music to it with this strange animation. And then there's like these weird creatures from a different land, and there's a submarine, and it's weird and bright and colorful, and you will never see anything like it. I don't know if you've watched that, Tyler, but
I
super
haven't, but
trippy. I want to throw out Fantastic Mr. Fox.
oh,
And Isle of Dogs. I think they're very interesting. That's Wes Anderson. Obviously, people know that. Wes Anderson is a very visual director, his style, but the way he does stop motion with the photorealistic fur with the dogs and Isle of Dogs, or having George Clooney voice the fox and building these environments that are sort of dark and dingy, but you're lighting these mini sets and everything. The fact that Fantastic Mr. Fox, as you pointed out in previous weeks, is a Criterion, as they don't honor animation as much, is sort of crazy. I think that Fantastic Mr. Fox is very good, but I think Isle of Dogs is like super awesome. I like the cast they have. I like the animation on the dogs, the micro movements, the sound design that they employ into all of this that layers through the Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs specifically is incredible. Of all these dogs on Garbage Island, they use visual humor very well with the animation, which is sometimes hard to get across with stop motion. And it's just a very visually pleasing sort of dry comedy that Wes Anderson nails in his tone and style. I will throw out Iron Giant.
ooh,
I really do enjoy Iron Giant. I think it's a very well done story. It's hand drawn and computer, a bit of mix of both, and it's got a really emotional impact. Vin Diesel in one of his best roles where he says very little and it's more visual. I like the junkyard sequence where the Iron Giant's trying to fit in, and just this interaction with the kid. The way the trees are portrayed in the wind is very visually pleasing as well and very realistic. I like they sort of create this reddish orange like sort of future, but it's still realistic enough. The way they paint the skies, the backdrops, the suns, all that stuff is beautiful through and through. I will throw out one here. This is my Little Mermaid. I know you mentioned that one, but I think it's super bright and colorful, and the way they use the animation to enhance the songs and the characters, especially Kiss the Girl, Under the Sea, the way the palace looks and has that shiny, glossy sort of lens flare look before that was a thing, but with animation.
I don't really remember that.
The sun glitters over the window and gives a sort of lens flare on the windows. So
Right,
that's a really nice detail. Kiss the Girl with the stars and the fireflies and all that stuff. Under the Sea is perfect and excellent. The ink from Ursula when she sings "Poor Unfortunate Souls" or does anything, particularly her visuals when she pops out of the sky, out of the ocean, and she's rocking this ship and doing all this. That is terrifying as a child.
Oh, yeah,
but
it
that
was
is amazing animation. The way they went from light to dark. I love the chef chasing the crab and the way they make the photorealistic wood, and all the kitchen utensils look very, very visual and real. And you could see this as a kitchen in any ship or in your house. There's the cutting board is a chunk of wood, and the way they use the grain and stuff, just the minor details. But Chicken Run, I love Chicken Run. I know it's not I think it looks really, really good. I would say Shaun the Sheep is pretty good too. And Pirates Band of Misfits is a really, really interesting, beautiful claymation film as well. But I think Chicken Run, for me, it's like the first big one. I like the voice cast. I like the way the sheds are portrayed, the lighting specifically, where they have the little, they would have like a single light bulb or something hanging over, really lights up the chicken coop and gives it that realistic look. The way they make the house look really menacing with the shadows and the darkness. And there's this like level of, if you go out of this coop, you die, and there's like sort of horror elements mixed in. Again,
Yeah,
there's
very
one movie on my list that has some horror elements that the way they use it effectively sort of makes a film noir, which we'll get to. But those are my honorable mentions there, and yeah, lots of great animation out there.
way too much.
I mean, that's not a problem, is it?
No, not especially.
Why don't you jump in with one? Give me one, Tyler, here.
Okay, so I'm gonna get my stop motion pick out of the way here. And a lot of people, as much as I gripe about animation not being taken seriously, a lot of people might have noticed that I don't talk a lot about stop motion. And the simple fact of the matter is, I respect the amount of hard work and effort that goes into the craft more than I really do enjoy the story and the characters, oddly enough, which it sounds like a weird thing to say, but I've never really been into Wallace and Gromit or the Tim Burton movies, even as a kid, where I thought they were super interesting and I loved the trailers. But then when I saw the movies themselves, there was something that, I don't know what it was, but something just fell flat. But that's not to say I don't like stop motion at all. Like I said, Kubo and the Two Strings was so good that I had for it to be an honorable mention. Chicken Run was probably the claymation movie from that studio in particular that I enjoyed the most, because I actually watched that one more than once. And for my stop motion pick, I am going with Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs, because everything that you just said about Wes Anderson was absolutely true. And as I was thinking of notes to write down for this video, it occurred to me that directors who go back and forth between live action and animation, like Anderson or Richard Linklater, the thing that they do is that they take their live action style and incorporate it into animation as much as they can. And I think in this case, that's what makes the imagery feel so much more grounded, despite the fact that there's still the fantastical element of talking dogs who are incredibly deadpan to each other, which, minor side note, even though I don't really like dry humor all that much, the cast members just work so well here, especially Edward Norton as Rex, who is, despite his name, is so analytical that drives everyone crazy. And that part was just hilarious. I can't believe I'm saying this. Isle of Dogs made me like a Jeff Goldblum performance for once.
You don't like Jeff Goldblum?
I don't like the stuttering. It doesn't work for me. But either way, it's the fact that despite the fact that he's dumb as a stump and constantly licks his own wounds, can predict the future a hell of a lot better than the dog Prophet, which, really say that out loud. You guys heard the rumor, right? No. What rumor? Oh, about my brother from another litter. He killed himself. He actually hanged himself by his own dog collar. Oh my God, that is so horrible. Yeah. This little bits like that, they're just really damn stupid.
Yeah,
but
Bryan
you're absolutely...
Cranston is also really good in this film. I'm not a huge Cranston fan. I like Breaking Bad enough, but I just think that he's sort of one note at points. Malcolm in the Middle, he's sort of funny, but this one is my favorite Cranston performance.
I can understand that. He's definitely a lot more subdued than he usually is, but you're absolutely right about portraying visual humor in this movie to great effect, because Wes Anderson does all the stuff that you would expect him to do. Everything is super symmetrical within each shot. And something that I noticed when I was watching clips in research for this is that nearly every shot, whether it's our main group of dogs or two dogs fighting over a bag of garbage that they're going to eat for food, or really just three separate characters within the same shot, they're all symmetrically designed to shape up like a triangle within the frame, which is nothing new for him, but it also replicates the Akira Kurosawa aesthetic that he's trying so hard to pay tribute to, because that's exactly what Akira Kurosawa did. He organized his actors in the form of shapes so that your eyes can look back and forth between each characters in the exact same shot. And that's why Kurosawa was such a great visual director. It's his stories and characters that always make me have mixed feelings towards his movies in general. But like I said, the aesthetic is captured so well here. He does the same thing where his scene transitions go from left to right. And the fact that the camera, the actors who are not really actors. They're fake porcelain mannequins. Some of them have very realistic and authentic dog hair and clothes, like you had just pointed out. The fact that the camera, the actors, and the settings are all moving within the exact same shot feels incredibly seamless. It feels as if it's live action. And while I don't usually like to praise animation for feeling like live action, because I mean, movies are escapism, and animated movies are one of the greatest forms of escape because you know it's not real, but it's supposed to feel real either way. Those shots just add to the realism, and they also add to the humor because once in a while a shot will start off with a dog talking, but then the camera will whip over to another character who tries to one up them, or that incredibly great elevator sequence where they're going from left to right, but Chief and Atari split up, but the other dogs go smack into a radioactive garbage can, which when I saw that, when the camera went right in there and then it just faded to black, my mouth was on the floor and I felt so bad for laughing, but it just came out of nowhere and it was so well done. And that camera move was what told the joke as opposed to the actual dialogue within the script.
Yeah, I will say I like Jeff Goldblum a lot. I found him very charming in Jurassic Park, and he's just a weird, quirky person. I think he's very good in The Fly.
He was good in that, yeah.
I love Jeff Goldblum's delivery. Life finds a way. I like we need more unique weirdos in Hollywood. I know we have a bunch, but I like that he's getting.
We have too many though.
And Yoko Ono is also in this movie, which is probably the strangest casting choice of anything. I mean, you got Harvey Keitel and Frances McDormand and Greta Gerwig.
Johansson.
But Yoko Ono is in this movie. And that was like the one thing that I noticed when the trailer came out. I will say that another director that's good from jumping from live action to animation or vice versa is Brad Bird, Incredibles, Mission Impossible 4.
That's fair.
So,
and even Tomorrowland.
I have not seen Tomorrowland, so I can't say.
I have to be honest, like, I can't believe I'm saying this. Tomorrowland actually feels like a live action Ghibli movie based on the creativity that Bird comes up with. You can tell that it was definitely a huge influence with some of the action scenes where they have these incredibly wacky gadgets that he uses in such an imaginative effect. There's one point where Brett Robertson has to go to George Clooney's house and she gets scared off by a security dog, but she notices there are no footprints in the mud and she realizes that dog's not real. It's a hologram. So she walks right through it. And it's a shot done in one take where it feels like there's a live action dog and they definitely did some composites here and there, but it looked incredibly seamless. And that's just one example of how really well done Brad Bird can blend the two of them together because CGI is animation, unfortunately. And that's why a lot of movies look like crap because they're incredibly fake. But you're absolutely right about him. I thought about putting a Robert Zemeckis choice on this list because even though the animation itself isn't really authentic, he does find a way to make the movies entertaining. Like his A Christmas Carol and Polar Express aren't technically good, but there are entertaining and very commendable aspects about them.
Well, I mean, as far as Christmas movies goes, Polar Express is a lot better than a lot of Christmas movies because Christmas movies can get really bad. So if you give me Christmas movies, I will take Polar Express over I will take it over Christmas with the Cranks or some crappy Hallmark movie or even some major releases like most Scrooge movies, unless it's Scrooge for like the original 50s one. So Polar Express does have imagination and style. It's just dated a bit in its animation, but back then it was pretty groundbreaking because when it came out, I went and saw it in theaters with my family and it was really cool. We never seen anything quite like that for a Christmas film. So
yeah, and same with A Christmas Carol. Like up close, the textures on everyone's skins, the detail on Jim Carrey's nose, that stuff looks fine. It's when they're from a distance that they look like artificial dolls. But Zemeckis can do flight sequences incredibly well, make you feel as if you're riding a roller coaster, which is kind of like a couple other choices I have on this list where they have camera movements that feel like tracking shots or POVs of a roller coaster ride in particular. Or I've never seen it, but Zemeckis made a hard R Beowulf movie with Angelina Jolie that people enjoy, and it was co-written by Neil Gaiman of all people, which
I'm just trying to remember this movie.
It was okay. So it had Angelina Jolie, Crispin Glover, Anthony Hopkins, John Malkovich, tons of actors that you would have to listen to very closely in order to notice them because, again, they're not really there. And for a lot of people, that was the problem. They feel as if the writing, the hard art violence, and Angelina Jolie as Grendel's mother were all really well done. It was just
We're
the
talking
fact
about
that these, like,
Beowulf here.
yeah, Beowulf.
Okay, I've seen that.
And judging by your face, you don't have
It's
that many nice things to say.
Okay, I'd put it up there with what's that Mila Jokovic movie that's. Oh my goodness.
No, don't say Ultraviolet. Do not say Ultraviolet.
Yeah, that's the one. Like for me, it compares to Ultraviolet. I've watched them both, and they're okay.
They're fake. They're fake.
Yeah. I will throw it there. The Secret of Nim. I adore The Secret of Nim. Now I am a huge fan growing up. Background context on this. American Tail is delightful. I love American Tail. I think it's excellent use of shadows, and the rain technique they use for the streets is phenomenal. And Five Goes West was one of my favorite animated movies as a kid. I love that. I like the Wild West setting. That's just really cool because I always like cowboys. But for me, Secret of Nim was always the one that was very interesting because not only was it a really cool movie, which we'll get to in a minute, but it was a book that I could read. So that was neat. So for me, this movie really just sort of took the book and the source material and elevated. I like the animation on the rock where they live, the way the rain comes, the fear of the farming, the harvest of the tilling of the land, whatever you want to call it. To come was sort of this very real, really fear. And when they got to it, it got incredibly dark. And I was like, oh, crap, I watched this as a kid. But like, it's so darn good in that aspect. The thorn bush where the rats live is very, very well done. The council chambers with Nicodemus and all the rats is sort of this like this sort of like throwback to like these weird like castle gatherings for like knights and such, which was really, really neat. The way they incorporated the trees and the water and everything into this sort of underwater hidden environment was very, very, very well done. The animation on the main characters did not blow me away, but I like the dynamics of Mrs. Frisbee, the lead rat, or the in this. And the way her clothes just blew in the wind and it felt natural. Now, this was 1982. Now, for me, The Rescuers was a fun little movie. I really like The Rescuers. And you can see a lot of The Rescuers in this, but they just sort of took those techniques and they made it better. They made all the dynamics, just little bits of the wind blowing, the dirt scattering, their footsteps, the sound design improved. Just everything got a little bit better. Everything just sort of felt more real in that. And I do think the animation really, really shines when they get to the end and they're trying to move the rock to save the house. And they have all this, and then bad things start to happen. And it's just, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it or haven't read the book, because I do think it's 100% worth a watch. I don't think it's for small kids, though. Straight up. I do not think it's meant for 6-year-olds. But beautiful animation, great characters, great storytelling. I like the aspect we get of the farmers where you barely see them, like a feet or a hand, or you hear a voice, sort of like the Peanut style of adults in this. Just an overall beautiful movie, but the way it presents its animation is incredibly dark.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Don Bluth. What do you expect? He's the guy who allegedly said that you could show kids anything as long as there's a happy ending. And in some cases, yeah, that's probably true. But that doesn't mean we want to actually experience all that incredibly dark shit. I mean, who hasn't gotten Littlefoot's mom dying out of their head already? I mean, at least the Lion King skimped over the speech by just showing the body.
That's true. Yeah, I do like Land Before Time.
Here's the weird thing. I've never been the biggest fan of Don Bluth stuff. I think the closest I've ever gotten to watching one of his movies from beginning to end was All Dogs Go to Heaven, which I think Burt Reynolds was the main character. And now that those Fox movies are bought by Disney, some of those are on Disney Plus, and I have the chance to check them out. Some of which are probably good. Some of them, like Thumbelina and Rockadoodle, probably not. Oh yeah, and
Well,
Pebble
I
and the
mean,
Penguin, that one was
if
shit.
you're looking at Don Bluth, definitely the highlights of his filmography career are
Everything in the Beginning.
Everything in the Beginning, but then later on in Anastasia is a particularly beautiful movie.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But how do you feel about dogs? Do you like your dog? Do you want to feel happy when you're done? Don't watch All Dogs Go to Heaven or All Dogs Go to Heaven 2. And I think there's a Christmas one. Like it's
the Christmas one's actually fine. It's just an hour-long version of A Christmas Carol, and they're very self-aware. Like they make it clear they're just reenacting it for this one character just to pull a prank on him, and it ends up working.
Yeah, the one thing All Dogs Go to Heaven is great, but it will not leave you in a happy mood.
Thanks for the tip.
So if you like your dog and you're in a bad mood, don't watch this movie. It does have sort of a happy ending, but okay. It takes a roller coaster to get there. One movie I think by Don Bluth that is just bad, and there's a lot of defenders online. Titan AE is not good.
No, it's not.
People swear by this movie. It's an oddball sci-fi film that has dated animation, that has some really good ideas and a decent voice cast, but it's not good. I really don't understand why people like it. So I'm sticking with The Secrets of Nim. Because I really like this film. I like the book. I just think it's really, really great. There's a Secret of Nim 2, which I've just found out about recently. I'll pick it up and see.
It's probably crap.
I don't know. I'll watch it again. See if it's. I probably watched it back in the day, but couldn't tell you. So, yes. So Don Bluth did do the animation for The Rescuers, which translates into his style. You can definitely.
Yeah, and he also did Fox and the Hound. In fact, I think he's one of the animators who several animators quit when the one dog who was supposed to die ended up surviving, because for them, it just made more sense to the story. But I guess because they killed off Todd's mom in the first couple minutes, they thought that one death was enough for the story, which I kind of understand. But at the same time, this death hits a lot closer to home to the characters. Plus, I gotta be honest, I didn't like that dog anyways.
Are you a fan of The Fox and the Hound? Because I've watched this and
it's okay.
I don't love it, but I don't hate it. It feels to me like a middle of the road Disney movie that has some cuteness for families. But it very much really give me the storytelling that I was sort of expecting out of these two best friends.
Oh, very much so. Like my biggest problem is that as great as the side characters and the villains are, they all do more than The Fox and the Hound, which is interesting of all things. Like, yeah, the Fox and the Hound bits are incredibly cutesy, and they have good actors. Like Corey Feldman is a little Todd, but Kurt Russell, who only has like 3 lines, because Copper actually stopped speaking for the second half of the movie. That part I actually enjoyed because he was starting to mature as a character compared to Mickey Rooney as Todd, who was your typical Mickey Rooney character. There's the Mama Owl, who I have to be completely honest. Every time I watch this movie, I thought it was a papa, and I feel bad saying that because the actress was a woman. I'm sorry, folks, but that voice does not do her justice. I know it makes her stand out, but plus you have Tigger as the woodpecker, who, yeah, just say that out loud. Tigger is a woodpecker.
Hey, you have Scarlett Johansson as a snake in the Jungle Book remake, but that works pretty good.
Yeah, because they did something different on that one.
Yeah, no, I've never been a fan of this movie. Like, I've never disliked it. I just never been a fan.
It's okay. It's just okay. It's one of those movies
generic and sort of basic. It feels like Bambi 2.0, but with foxes and hounds. Like they use the same sort of forests and music.
Yeah, but Bambi is very calming and meditative when it does tell its own story, and it actually takes its own time compared to the other movies that would follow on. But because Bambi was such a big bomb, they couldn't apparently afford to tell more stories in that vein, even though they're doing a photorealistic.
I did not know that.
Even though they're doing yet another photorealistic adaptation of Bambi, even though this is the one story where you should not fuck it up. Like, if you're going to tell it, at the very least, do what you were supposed to do with Dinosaur. don't have the animals talk, but you're not going to do that, are you? Why am I even arguing? I'm just
yeah.
gonna get into my next pick.
What do you got? What do you got coming up here for me?
Okay, so for my next pick, I decided to pick a movie that uses so many different styles of animation at the exact same time to create something that feels wholly original and unique. And for that, I chose a Brazilian animated feature called Boy in the World that we talked about in our best of coming of age movies. Now, for those who don't know, Boy in the World is a very simple story about a little boy who runs away from home to find his father, who has moved away in order to find work. And in the process, he's taken in by several different people who show him the hard, enduring labor that they have to go through in order to make ends meet so that they don't get replaced by the industrial machinery that's taking away a lot of their jobs. But the big kicker is that there's probably 10 to 15 minutes worth of dialogue in a 90-minute movie, and it's all done in Portuguese that's actually backwards, so nobody can really understand it. And there's so much pressure to tell the story as visually as possible with the expressions, the body language, and the bright and colorful animation. And there are ways where you can fuck up a movie like that. Yesterday, I saw a movie called The Triplets of Belleville that has a very similar type of style, but I couldn't get into that one because the designs, what you were saying about Sophie and Howl's Moving Castle, that is absolutely nothing compared to the people in Triplets of Belleville. They look fucking disgusting. And I feel bad saying that because part of it was very deliberate, but characters have either too much or too little muscle that just make them feel incredibly off-putting to look at. Like the grandson that this woman is trying to rescue over the course of this movie has like the skinniest limbs in any movie I've ever seen, but the biggest nose ever. A nose that Pinocchio would be glad he didn't have. And yet I couldn't even get into like the emotional visual storytelling because every character has only one or two expressions 90% of the time. And it takes the stakes out of the very little story that this movie had. But thankfully, that is not the case here. I'm going to try my best to say this guy's name. Ave Abreu. I tried.
They don't have pretty close to me.
They don't have pronunciations on here. But anyways, this guy utilizes every different type of animation style, every drawing technique, every drawing tool that you can come up with. There's 2D animation, there's computer animation, there is painting, there are pencil crayons. He uses chalk and felt pens at this point. And in case it wasn't obvious, these are tools that a kid would use to create their own little drawing in a kindergarten class. And I think that's the visual style that he's trying to go for in this movie because everything looks incredibly bright, vibrant, colorful, and fluid. They all look like colors that kids would want to draw with. And they have the consistent amount of detail that would go into a kid's drawing, where during the more optimistic and uplifting moments of the film, our main character is surrounded by blank white backgrounds, but there are always these ponds for him to swim in with the fish. There are these birds and squirrels that he can chase up these lush and very beautiful trees that look like the Chicka Chicka Boom Boom trees, oddly enough. I don't know if he read that book as a kid, but
that
really
book sounds familiar. What's the book called?
I can't remember exactly what it's called, but just type that in online and it'll probably tell you. But it has the consistent amount of detail, like I just said. There are all of these things. There's
this book. Okay, this book. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There's a fantastic parade sequence where the characters playing music, their instruments have these bubbles that are supposed to represent the musical sounds, and the kid is riding on them along with the music. And it's just so, it has so many imaginative scenarios a kid would come up with. But when things start to get a lot darker and he's experiencing things about human life that are tough to digest for any kid, the atmosphere becomes a lot more dreary. He's surrounded by overpopulated cities where the colors are significantly more muted. There are these black bird-shaped tanks that are supposed to represent the fascist government. The backgrounds have more color to them. They're either slightly gray or they have one specific color to really set the mood. And as for the way they portray facial expressions and body language, it's very minimalist because the characters only have eyes on their faces. So the characters really have to like express in a pantomime way as much as they can. And whenever they're experiencing different emotions, their eyelids tend to change very drastically because when when this kid is very happy, his eyes stay the exact same. When he's relaxed, his eyes actually stay shut and he stretches his arms out to really make you feel the amount of emotions that he's experiencing. But when he feels really sad, like when his dad has to leave, his eyes actually literally turn into tears. And that can instantly get you emotional because nobody wants to see that in a drawing. So, like, whenever these drawings get explicitly dark, it makes you feel a lot more sad because you can't imagine anyone drawing something like this on purpose. It's a very simple story told in a simple way, but in my opinion, that's what makes it so damn effective.
Yeah, I'm just looking at pictures of it now as you describe it. Very, very interesting. The director just does animation. He's only done 4 features and they all look equally as weird as whatever this is.
You said 4? I can only find 2. I found
4.
that I found that one like called Cosmic Boy, where a lot of people describe it as the original Infinity Train or something like that.
Well, it says here, I'm just because I was just curious. He's done Grotto Cosmo, The Scarecrow, and Birth, as well as The Boy and the World. So it says he's got
I've never
4
actually heard of those.
Very unique looking animation all around. Yeah.
And I almost forgot to mention, like, one of the minor details that I noticed is that along with the backwards Portuguese, every single sign or billboard in this movie is either backwards and or upside down, which when I saw that for the first time, it actually reminded me of when I was a little kid and we would go on road trips. Every time we saw those signs or billboards, that was the kind of feeling that I had. I couldn't understand the words or what the numbers were supposed to be. So it felt like it might as well have just been backwards the entire time. And that's a very interesting feeling for a kid to experience as they're watching this movie. The fact that life really does feel as if it's upside down once you experience real world troubles, especially during the last 10 minutes where the ending makes the entire story feel incredibly metaphorical. I don't want to spoil exactly what it is because I had no idea that's what they were leading into, but outside of a very over the top montage of live action footage of like just tearing up the environment to shreds, something that even Miyazaki would find preachy. It's just, yeah, it's like you said, a great movie. Just I wouldn't show it to 6-year-olds because even if they're not scared by it, the ending, as metaphorical as it is, as I just pointed out, it's going to leave them with so many questions. And if you're an adult who can't answer those, it's going to be a tough time.
Yeah, very, very interesting pick. I think I have to probably check this out one of these days.
Oh, absolutely. It's well worth it. And like I said, only 10 to 15 minutes worth of dialogue that's completely pointless. It really is visual storytelling at some of its best.
Yeah, my next one here is one that I saw the trailer and I thought it looks cute, I'll go and watch that. Why not? It's fun. I ended up adoring Zootopia, or as Disney Plus calls it, Zootropolis. For some reason, it's labeled Zootropolis on Disney Plus.
Oh, that's the British title.
But like on my US Disney Plus, it says Zootropolis. I don't understand. But either regardless, what Zootopia does is tell a charming story with some dark elements and themes. It's pretty much what we expect from Disney in certain ways. But the details is why I put this on this list, because I think the details in whether it's Judy Hops's ears and the fur and the way just the rabbit comes alive in the movement and the sort of realisticness, or Nick, I believe is the name of the fox, Nick's Wild, played expertly by Jason Bateman. I never thought I would say that. Because Jason Bateman is good, but like, Jason Bateman as a fox, I like the way the fox moves, the way its eyes are drawn, or CG in this case, because it's a CG film. I like the way the fur is, the little details of the world, the way we get to see the entire world through the eyes of someone who's never been there before. We get the fish out of water going through it. And I know a lot of people will point to the sloth sequence in here, which is, yes, it's a funny little bit. But I do think it shines more in Jungle World. Jungle World, I think, is where the animation really gets to show off, where we see the first animal turn wild and go back to their animal instincts. the essence of the rain, the dark jungle lighting with all the trees and the forests, and them just watching this sort of cheetah transform and become animalistic. That transformation is very reminiscent of American Werewolf in London, but in animation style. The way they do it, it looks so realistic and so well done for CG. And I don't think I've seen anything like that before. But even the main town, the way they show the streets, the sidewalks, down to the linoleum floors of the police station, just everything looks so perfect and polished. They added little details everywhere. And animation is all about the little details. I like that. The little details really bring this world to life. Claushauser is a fun character, but the way his cheeks and his fur moves really does add to the quirkiness and fun of his character. They made him a cute, lovable animal with animation. And that's why he's funny, because not only does his character fit the jokes, but the animation matches the jokes. So they're building a physical gag in there by building these characters to look like that. The traffic, the way they have the cars sort of look a little unrealistic, but it looks more like a die-cast car, like a Hot Wheels in a sense. And I like that sort of approach they take to it. Every metallic object, every fence, every little brick adds to build this world out. Now, not only is it a fantastic film, I like that they have these animals going back to their instincts and such, because you can explore anger for kids with that, because that's what they're exploring. They're exploring anger, and
hatred.
Some kids have tantrums or get angry. Kids can get angry. That's a normal thing, but it explores it in such a way that you wouldn't necessarily see that. And I like the big old mayor's lab house thing at the end there, where they're having this big showdown, and it's just really dark. And it sort of gives me those. They could have gone darker, I think, 100%. I think they could have gone 100% darker here, but it's one of the more riskier Disney films in the last few years, which is not saying a ton because Disney is not risky these days, but the animation on every texture in this really brings the world to life.
I hope Disney's taking notes from what Donald Glover said a couple days ago for that exact reason. Oh, he said the movies are getting boring now because no one wants to take any chances because, well, guess what will happen if they take any chances? Get canceled. Sorry. Seriously, it's bad when the star of the Lion King remake, probably one of the safest and one of the most boring cinematic experiences for that exact reason, is saying that movies are getting boring. I have no idea if he called himself out for being in the Lion King remake. He probably didn't, but just don't fuck up the Lion King Godfather Part 2 sequel, whatever Barry Jenkins is doing next. Because it sounds like that's what they're going for.
I mean, the new Lion King, the remake, is the Lion King. It's the same movie with like one additional song, and the lions don't really have many expressions. It looks really good.
Yeah.
Looks great. I just feel like we've seen that before.
That's because we have seen that before, damn it. And don't get me wrong, there are scenes that should have been shot for shot to begin with, like the Wildebeest Stampede, Circle of Life, Hakuna Matata. Keeping that stuff the exact same, I got no problem with. And I'll say this, they tried to give Beyonce a little bit to do as Nala when she sneaks off of Pride Rock. That part was decent enough.
Although that is the one downfall of Zootopia. I do not need Shakira in this movie whatsoever. It has nothing to do with anything. She's just there because she can sing a song.
Yeah, but that's all she does, sing a song. She doesn't really interfere with the story.
She shows up on billboards. They mention her. It's like, oh, we got to build towards the big stars singing a song.
Well, they also have the whole celebrity trying to get us to come together and be unified when that doesn't solve shit, which the fact that Disney pointed that out, that's really saying something.
Yeah, I like Zootopia, though. I think it's in the details, and I like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And details are the big thing for what makes my next pick feel just incredibly gorgeous and beautiful and incredibly subtle to look at. This is going to be my Studio Ghibli pick, which, as I said before, was a really tough toss-up between this based on its subtlety and Howl's Moving Castle, just based on the large scale and scope that he accomplishes. Because Howl's Moving Castle is my favorite Miyazaki movie, and the scope is massive and gorgeous and leads to a lot of the entertainment value, but when it comes to Studio Ghibli movies, I actually find ones like Nausicaa, Spirited Away, and even Ponyo a little bit overrated, because even though the sheer size of it is what makes the stakes of the story, the massive world building, and the themes so important and investing, you know exactly what it all means. You know it's going to lead into some big preachy message about protecting the environment, which, don't get me wrong, we need to protect the environment to not die. I understand that. It's just, you know exactly what they're going to say, and the preachiness takes out the enjoyment without really leaving anything up to interpretation. But with my Studio Ghibli pick, when Marnie was there were so many minor details that just made the visual style look incredibly beautiful and absolutely luscious. I love smaller scale Ghibli movies like When Rises or Kiki's Delivery Service, where the story is smaller and intimate, but the fantastical elements are told in a bigger way to really show the amount of change that are happening in the characters' lives. And for me, it goes right down to the fact that characters' clothings and the environment around them, the colors are telling the visual metaphors in such an incredibly nuanced way. The color blue especially surrounds our main character Anna as she's dealing with the past grief of losing her parents at such a young age, where she doesn't even know her own roots. She's constantly wearing a blue shirt that's in a darker shade. Her eyes are blue to the point where it shocks everyone around her. When someone points out, hey, look at her blue eyes, isn't that insane? She actually lashes out at them as if she's lashing out at someone calling out her past grief and her struggles. The town that she's staying in for the summer has this luscious, bright, beautiful sky and ocean that is much more calming and uplifting to look at. And it shows the divide that she's experiencing between herself and the other people around her. But it's also a good sign that things can turn around for her, especially when she's introduced to Marnie, who, when we see her for the first time, she's wearing a white nightgown with a small blue ribbon. So her pain is hidden, but it's also implied to be a lot smaller in comparison to Anna. And it shows that she might actually be a worthy mentor to help her put aside the things that are holding her back in life. But it becomes very clear, especially during the final scene where we see the two of them. Marnie is locked up in her bedroom on the side, and Anna, in her light blue pajamas, is willing to walk barefoot into the dark blue muddy waters in order to say goodbye to Marnie, because they know for a fact it's the last time they're going to see each other, and they need to acknowledge the amount of change that they've put in each other's lives. Her blue eyes start to tear up. Both their blue eyes start to tear up because, yeah, Anna does have blue eyes. She has a darker shade of blue on her nightgown than before to show that things are really going south for her, and that they really need each other, and they need their memories in order to put the darker memories at complete ease. I can't believe I always fuck up this one, but that just goes to show how scatterbrained I get over how much I love this movie. But in any case, the color symbolism is there. It's incredibly well done. It's something I've talked about in much clearer detail on my channel and on your channel when we did, again, best coming of age movies. But one thing I haven't talked about, and I think is a little bit more subtle, is the way they use shot composition in order to highlight who's the protege and who's the mentor at a given point. Because there are some sequences like Marnie putting this purple coat over Anna so that she can be like the flower girl at this one party or whatever, or Anna and Marnie making a sandcastle together where you can age one of them to appear older than the other, and the mentorship effect would absolutely work either way. Or this one particular shot where Anna, the one who's been learning everything from Marnie, is embracing Marnie in her own hands to show that she actually has learned something and can actually benefit her just as much, if not more. Oh, and this one great sequence where Marnie not only teaches Anna how to row, almost as if it's a parent-daughter relationship going on, but there's also this one scene where she finally feels at ease for once, and she expands her arms and closes her eyes, much like the little boy did in Boy in the World, where she feels as if this relationship has completely put her at ease. And it's something that you can only tell with shot composition, with animation, with the color symbolism, with incredibly good costume design. You can only do those things in live action for these things to work. But I can't imagine anything like that in Spirited Away. I can't imagine anything like that in Princess Mononoke, because they tell you exactly what to feel and why. This one trusts you as an audience member to make up your own conclusions, even though there are twists thrown in there that explain what exactly is going on and what is the relationship between the two of them.
Yeah, there is one image I'm curious about. I'm just going to quickly what do you think this image represents here?
I'm so glad you picked this image because
it looks intriguing. Like, I'm thinking, if blue is her burdens, is this like the window to her soul and she's not letting anyone in? Or like, what would you...
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
But also, because Marnie is so far in, because she's locked up, she also can't really escape on her own either, because there is something holding her back. I don't want to spoil what it is, but that is incredibly spot on. There's another great shot where, if you type in when Marnie was there on a mirror, there's one that really sticks out in particular, where Anna is in those pajamas, as I just pointed out. She's looking out the window, and we don't see what she's looking at, but we see her reflection in the window to highlight the amount of loneliness that she feels she's experiencing. I don't know if that shot is actually there, but for me, that's the prime shot. One? I tried tweeting it.
Is this the one we're looking at?
That's not the one, although that is a good one too. Like I said, like, it's nighttime.
By the imagery in this film.
Yeah, it's nighttime, and she's looking at her reflection in the window just because she feels as if she's the only one that really understands what she's going through, until she talks to Marnie and she starts to come out of her shell.
Yeah, it's just fascinating looking film.
Oh, it absolutely is. And for all those things that you complained about with Ghibli movies, I would definitely say this one will do a lot for you. In my opinion, anyway.
It just looks intriguing.
Oh, it absolutely is. And don't get me wrong, like, using the color blue as a metaphor for sadness and grief, it's absolutely nothing new. But director Hiromasa Yonbayashi puts it in so many places where it's so obvious to put blue in there that you wouldn't even look at it, like the sky or the ocean or those windows barricading Marnie in her house, which is something that I didn't notice before. Every time I look at an image, every time I watch the movie, I notice something new, and it makes me appreciate the amount of detail and nuance that Yonbayashi and his animators put into it. This was supposed to be Ghibli's final film, and if it was, they would have ended it with a bang, in my opinion.
Did they make another one, or?
No, they didn't make another one. It's very much standalone. Studio Ghibli has this very interesting thing of adapting British books for their source material, like how Spirited Away copies Alice in Wonderland, Howl's Moving Castle is a British book, Earthsea was based on some Welsh-inspired mythological stuff, and Secret World of Arrietty, which is also from Yonbayashi, is the Borrower's book. Yeah, and Yonbayashi is really good at taking small-scale scenarios and making them feel large and cinematic without ever going too large. He never goes Christopher Nolan or David Lean excessive when it comes to their scope.
Well, I want to put one out there, one that I was not a fan of the first time I saw. I watched this movie and said, I don't get it. But then the second time, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse has competing animation styles, but the first time I saw it, it just gave me such a headache because the frame rate.
Really?
I know, just the frame rate on some of the animation and the different styles, just like, it was all over there, and they had like grain marks, and it was, I just couldn't take it with my eyes there for a little bit, you know. But the second time around, I had seen it, so I wasn't really focused on the animation. I was focused on the story. Then the animation started to tell the story for me, and I was like, okay, well, this is pretty cool. Still gave me a bit of a headache because the frame rate is off at certain points. It's that first 10 minutes of animation, the frame rate's super off and gives me a bit of a migraine. But when we get into the story, I like the different aspects and the mixing of the animation. Because I think we've seen a lot of superhero films, and I guess again, I mentioned Big Hero 6 and such earlier, but I think there's a lot of superhero movies, and they all can all start to blend together. And I don't know if we really need an Incredibles 3. I think we have 1 and 2, and I think if they have a new story to tell and it's something different and unique, by all means, absolutely, because we'll get a great story. It's probably going to take about 12 years, though, because that's how things work for Brad Bird. But I think that what it does, starting off with this sort of like photorealistic version and this slow down frame rate is interesting to introduce us into the world and into the characters. And then it slowly gives us different characters from different universes. And I like the way it introduces them and gives us this big sort of multiverse and this big finale, combining all the animation styles. I think most particularly interesting of the Spider-Man styles is Nicolas Cage's sort of like film noir Spider-Man, because there's not a lot of film noir animation out there. And I'm always fascinated by film noir and this sort of like old school street vibe. I think Casablanca would be better if it was animated, because then you could do like a film noir World War II thing.
Ooh, I'd watch
that. Would be really, really cool to see. Like if you're going to remake a movie like that, do it in animation, like a really cool film, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just, and then Spider Pig is sort of this like computer cartoony, you know? And then you get all these different characters coming together, bringing their animation together to create probably the most and best unique Spider-Man style out there. Because it's not like you can say Spider-Man movies are usually unique on the visuals. You can point to Spider-Man
the first
2
Raimi movies.
The Raimi movies of having this bright, colorful style, but being very, very dark and having this sort of interesting, bright but dark look at New York City. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, despite it being terrible, did try to create a visual style with its electric power company and the way it went to more the Joel Schumacher 1990s Batman sort of thing.
I wouldn't
go that far. It did try to create a visual style, but did not deliver on the storytelling. And I mean, even Spider-Man Far From Home sort of creates this different version of New York City in sort of like this industrial light, showing like the disadvantaged and why Spider-Man is there to help. But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that could have been in 3D for all. Like, it was super weird. Like, the way it creates the multiple universes that cross over, the way it uses probably computer, but it feels hand-drawn. And Spider-Gwen particularly has an interesting, unique take with this sort of bright, modernistic approach to her New York City. But there's just a lot of interesting visuals that go into this. And I think combining them all together is its strength of this animation. Because there's a lot of movies that try to combine animation, and I think they do it fine. Because if you watch Batman: The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, these are individual stories. This is of Batman drawn in different styles by different animators, by different directors, put together. And it's a very unique take on Batman. But they don't always mesh. They're more like individual short films that are very enjoyable to watch. But what they do with Spider-Man is they're like, what if we combine it all? What if we put it together? What if every animated style is its own, but they could fit together? And I think that works so well, particularly where you have all the villains gathering in Peter Parker's bedroom for the first time. And you have Spider-Pig in this sort of 1950s cartoon. You have Miles Morales in this sort of photorealistic, patchy, odd frame rate there. You have Spider-Gwen in the more traditional modern Nickelodeon where everything looks hyper realistic. You have the older one there in this sort of shell shaded, and then there's Nicolas Cage in this film noir style, and I'm like, this should not work together, but it totally does. And I'm really upset at myself that the first time I went into it, I was just mad about the frame rate, because this is a beautiful movie from beginning to end, and I think the way it combines it all is one of the most amazing things this movie has to offer. And I see a lot of people online saying this is the best Spider-Man movie. I agree. It's the most unique Spider-Man movie out there. Because if you're going to pick the best Spider-Man movie or the best Batman movie, I don't think The Dark Knight is the best Batman movie. It's really good. It's the best Joker movie. I'd say go Batman Begins or Batman from '89. But this one, clearly in the Spider-Man realm, Spider-Man 1's pretty good movie. I like Green Goblin. It's got that hyperactive style. Spider-Man 2 has Doc Ock, incorporating some CG elements really well and bringing in Peter Parker. Spider-Man 3 has Sandman, which is a visual feast for the eyes, but still has some storytelling problems there. You've got the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, which is will they, won't they? It feels more like Dawson's Creek than a Spider-Man movie at certain points. And then you've got Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man Homecoming, which are very unique and fun in their own right, but they feel very safe in the way they tell the story. I like Michael Keaton as the Vulture, and Spider-Man Far From Home, Jake Gyllenhaal, they really try to do something with the visual style. But this nails every visual style that it wants to. There's something about musicians. I like musicians. I want them to have creative choice, and I want them to be able to make different types of music. But if you're going to genre hop, if you're going to be an artist who can do country, rock, pop, rap, etc., you need to nail every genre perfectly, or you stick to your genre. Def Leppard could never do country. They are a rock band through and through. They stick to their style. Bon Jovi is an example of doing it badly. They did country stuff, didn't work out. Their pop rock stuff, it's pretty good. You love Living on a Prayer, you love New Jersey. That's a pretty solid album. But then you come across certain artists that you can just genre hop, certain directors that can really create a different genres, different styles, and nail that. And I don't think there's too many of those out there. So what you do to combine that, you make Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse, and you nail every single style of animation and everything you're trying to do in a beautiful animated movie that sticks to no style, but has so much style. And considering where the director came from for the Bob Schreddy, I nailed that. Lost it up. But like, he made Monsters vs. Aliens, which is a cute little movie. It's nothing mind-blowing. They play it on YTV every weekend. Curse of the Were-Rabbit he worked on, and Puss in Boots, which is a cute but charming movie, but not going to blow any minds in the Shrek franchise. Just to go from that to Spider-Verse is, I don't know where you learn to do it, but it's incredible. I'm putting Spider-Verse on here because it subdued all my expectations and created something that I think is one of the biggest talking points in any superhero franchise in the history of franchises.
Oh, it absolutely does. And when it comes to the expressions on each of the characters, Spider Noir was definitely the scene stealer, even if it wasn't Nicolas Cage just doing his usual shtick. I love when they introduce him, his cape is flying in the hidden layer, and they're all just like, where did the wind come from? I wish there was more of Penny Parker, the anime girl, because it really just feels like they shoved her in there because, hey, she's a Spider-Man property, might as well do something. And I'm hoping if they make a sequel, because they probably will, that gets expanded upon a little bit, or at least she does, because everyone else had a backstory. Why the hell didn't she?
Yeah, I mean, another reason this movie is successful is Peter Ramsey from the art department. He worked on a lot of things, but this is definitely his finest work, because Rise of Guardians, as it is an interesting film to a certain point, but it definitely does have a style and an artistic vibe that you can see from Peter Ramsey really bringing that to. And this guy also worked on Minority Report and The Core as the art director, as well as Sausage Party, Castaway, AI. And you talk about bringing How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Godzilla, Dracula, Predator 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 5. This guy brings every element of every style of movie, puts it in here, and we're better for it. So give me Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Nine 2, Electric Spider-Loo. I don't know.
Hey, that's not
whatever the title's going to be.
That's not what it's going to be called. Why am I even arguing with you on this one? But I feel like you've said just about everything that can be said about this, and I kind of figured that you were going to put it on here anyways, which is why I didn't. And the other reason is that it's been a really long time since I've seen Spider-Verse. I felt like the first time I saw it was peak interest. It was just as mind-blowing, but revisiting it is still really entertaining. But I'm not sure if I keep walking into my dad and my sister seeing it halfway through, that it just, you feel like you got to start over in order to like appreciate every scene. Maybe it's that type of effect. But
I mean, I've seen it halfway through, and I've seen it from the beginning. I think I've seen it about 8 times since it came out, and I actually start to appreciate it more times every time it comes out, because there's more to appreciate in the visual style. Because the first time you see it, you're like, "What's that?" The second time, you're like, "Oh, this is really cool," and then you start to appreciate more aspects. I expected it to be
I expected it to be pretty good either way, just because it was from Lloyd and Miller,
Yeah.
the same guys who did the Lego movie. So, and because no one had high hopes for a Lego movie, and then it ended up being
I did.
legitimately really good. Yeah, whatever.
I own the Adventures of Clutch Power on Blu-ray, so like all those direct to, yeah, I own all the direct to DVD.
Well, congratulations. But
I'm
in
that
any
guy.
case, yeah, I love that they do use computer animation and hand-drawn stuff, because what you said about it looking hand-drawn, that's because more than likely it absolutely was, and it creates something that feels surreal. It feels completely, it feels like its own thing. And plus, the it's rude to point bit at the end. I gotta be honest, I never saw that meme, so I didn't actually understand the joke. I just thought it was a funny after credit scene, and albeit a completely pointless one.
Yeah, the writers on this are great.
Lord and Miller, that's what I meant to say.
It's Phil Lord and Randy Rothman. Randy Rothman wrote 22 Jump Street, produced Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Popstar, Never Stop Stopping, stuff like that. And then Phil Lord, well, you know what that guy did.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I really like it. I would, if this was the Spider-Man universe from now on out and we had no more live action Spider-Man, done. Cool. Let's go with
That'd be fine.
Hit me with another choice you got.
Well, this one will be a very easy one to hit up, because not only have we both seen it, we're literally looking at it right now. It is Wolfwalkers, which has one of the most experimental styles for a mainstream movie that I've seen in a while. One of the things I said in my best of the year list to explain why I rated it higher than Sold, which ended up winning Best Animated Feature, yes. Which, don't get me wrong, is great. It has some of Pete Docter's best imagination. It also has some of his worst jokes, if I'm being honest. But overall, I found the animation stood out in the best possible way based on how many experimental techniques they come up with. Techniques that I rarely, if ever, see in a movie like this. It was directed by Tom Moore and Ross Stewart, who I believe also made Secret of Kells, Song of the Sea, among a few others. And the first thing that I noticed early on was that so many of the characters, particularly any character who was either Irish or a wolf walker, had these very strange physical features on them where their character designs have these lines in between or these circles around them that make them feel as if they were written by a storyboard artist from scratch. So, for example, on our main character Maeve's face here, she has lines in between her face, like going down from this way to this way, which is how a storyboard artist decides where to put the eyes, the nose, how to make the mouth completely symmetrical. Or in their arms and legs, there'll be a circle right here to show where the joints are, but also to show just how long an arm should be. And it's hard to explain what makes it feel so good, but I think in terms of metaphors, it's supposed to differentiate who's an Irish character or a wolf walker and who's a British regular human being, to show the subtle differences between the characters and their cultures, but also to make it clear it's not really the minor differences that should be a reason to hate or wage war with one another. If anything, it's more important to focus on the things that make us similar, which is what makes the chemistry between our main characters, Robin and Maeve, feel incredibly authentic. And when the wolves in particular have these exact same features, they have very visible circles in their heads or in the rest of their bodies, like their legs. Even characters who are British, if they become wolf walkers, once they're in their wolf form, they have those exact same features too, features that they never had in the rest of the movie. That makes you really pay attention to what's going on. But easily the most impressive aspect of the film is the way that they visualize a wolf's sense of hearing or smell once they transform. When our main character, Robin, is trying out being a wolf for the first time, she's told to close her eyes and just listen. And we get the visual perspective of her ears. There's this blank black background, but everything she can hear starts to become visible. It has that storyboard look to them where they're all one specific color only. But once they're walking around and touching stuff, their vibrations spread out, and all the other objects like the bushes and the trees start to become a lot more visible, kind of like the echolocation bits from Daredevil that feel just incredibly genius. And the way that they visualize a wolf's sense of smell is by showing these POV tracking shots of them running through the woods on all fours, and everything they smell has their own specific color. There are these lines that they're following as if they're in a video game, and the tracking shots really make you feel like, again, you're on a 4D roller coaster ride or watching a Sam Raimi tracking shot where it's incredibly fast moving. It's going through so many different environments. You can see the environments even though they're going a mile a second, and it just creates such an immersive experience. There are even very minor details like adding in aspect ratios during the more intense parts of the movie to really make you focus in on a given character. So whenever a character starts to lash out, like Sean Bean's character, it'll go in 4:3 full screen to make you really zero in on his face. And once he becomes angry, you actually start to feel afraid of him. Or during the battle sequences or any intense stare down, it'll switch to anthropomorphic widescreen to make it feel epic and larger in scale. And the aspect ratios themselves are not your standard boxes like the Zoom chats that we're in right now. They're actually drawn to look like brush strokes to make it feel a little more rustic. And the storyboard approach with the character designs in particular makes them seem unpolished, but also a little bit more gritty in an interesting way, because the tone of the movie is up to par with something like Disney's Tarzan, where it is uplifting and appropriate for kids, but it does have darker moments of violence where there's a little bit of bloodshed. Our main character, Maeve, has a bite in her human ear, which really says a lot about how feisty she is as a person. But I don't know, there's, again, you can tell that the movies I appreciate the most on this list are the ones I get off track or start to pause with, because I just have so much to say about this movie. It's never going to come out as clearly and coherently as I would like to, even though the fact that I have all these notes written down on my laptop, but I try to look at you guys because I like you guys very much. But yeah,
it's a great poster too, eh?
It's an incredibly good looking poster. I'm glad I managed to get that one at the charity auction. But yeah, there are just so many minor details that make it such an infectious and warm atmosphere to look at. Plus, it has that rustic storyboard woodblock approach when it comes to drawing the forest and adding in these incredibly warm and comfortable colors like green, yellow, a little bit of brown because some of the leaves are starting to fall. I think it's become autumn at that point. And there's just so much attention to detail that really makes me want to check out the rest of the Cartoon Saloon movies because they look just as good, if not better.
Well, get excited. I was just clicking on the directors to see if they did anything else I knew. So the producer and director of Breadwinner, as well as the producer of Wolfwalkers, Nora Tomway and Tom Moore are making something called My Father's Dragon for Netflix.
That I have heard about, and I'm looking forward to that.
So, I mean, based upon Breadwinner, Song of the Sea, Wolfwalkers, all that sort of stuff, I'm like, this is gonna be the most unique movie on Netflix.
It very well could be.
I'm glad Netflix sees the value in non-traditional 3D animation, because I know that when Netflix puts out something, it's like, I like that they're doing the Castlevanias and they're doing like the Bojacks and they're doing a whole bunch of different things in adult animation, and they're doing stuff like that. And they're still doing kids animation. What was that one that was nominated for? What was that?
I think it was Over the Moon.
Oh no, I'm thinking of the CG one, but they're picking up on Boss Baby and a bunch of these properties that I really don't think are worth their time. I think they're fine for kids or whatever, but I like that they're focusing more now. That hopefully Father's Dragon will open the door to hand-drawn animation to get some more of that on Netflix. Not saying we need 1,000 shows, but it'd be nice to see one every couple of months of something hand-drawn, something unique right there for us to watch.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that Apple TV was so willing to pick this one up really goes to show that there are some big budget studios that realize this still has a lot to offer.
100%. So I will throw out one here. One that I grew up with that I think is beautiful in animation, conception, lighting, the way it paints the forest. This is, I'm trying to get the exact release date on this because it didn't technically come out like this. So I do like Winnie the Pooh. The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is a compilation film of shorts that they had been doing for many years. 1977, that's the year.
Yeah.
And it compiles all the different shorts from getting stuck in the hole to Tiggers bouncing around to Eeyore to literally everything, Humphlumps and Woozles, which terrified me as a child. When you're 4 years old, Humphlumps and Woozles are terrifying. It's like it's just completely weird and trippy. But I like what they did with this. I like that they showed you all of Winnie the Pooh in a lovely musical sort of storybook style. So for me, this is one of the first movies that I could watch all the way through at home because we had this on video or whatever, VHS back in the day. But you could sit down and you could watch segments of it. And as a kid, when you're 4 or 5 years old, it's hard to keep your attention span. So you'd watch 2 or 3 segments and say, that's really cute. And you come back and you could watch a couple more segments that way. And I like the way they brought to life Winnie the Pooh with the standard voice, which is very iconic to this day. I'm sure they still use the same voice actor if they could, or someone who imitates him. But Roo and Kanga and Eeyore and Piglet and Rabbit and Christopher Robin are all delightful characters. And Tigger is in there. The particular sequence that I think is great when Pooh gets lost in the woods. I like this sequence particularly because the way they use the trees and the crows, and they sort of create like a horror thriller for kids, just in the middle of this movie between the balloons and the honey trees and the happiness. And it's just like, okay, there's this now. Just Pooh lost in the wood, and it looks like everything's trying to take him out. And I always thought that was visually interesting. And then the final segment where he's in his house and he comes to visit and he has a little bit of honey left and he shares it, and sort of this more dark look at life. And it sort of goes from like pure happiness to like, look at everything bad that's going to happen in the future, the way it weaves it together. And I think the storybook, when they open up in the real life room, because they're only in the real life room for I think about a minute and a half, and they open up the book and they have all the toys sitting there on the toy chest and the terrifying Winnie the Pooh doll that looks nothing like Winnie the Pooh, by the blocks and everything. It's very, very interesting. Even the flood sequence in there is very, very fascinating, and the later segments really do implore this Owl, who is probably the best animated character in all the whole movie because of the way he moves his wings and such. This sort of unearthly wisdom to these childish characters that are just sort of literally doing whatever they want to do until reality sort of hits them to a certain thing, when they're running through the fog, when they're hiding in a tree stump, anything like that. There's just a lot of textures, there's a lot of detail, and there's a lot of maturity to the storytelling they bring to these shorts. The way they arrange them 100% is incredibly important to telling this sort of overarching story of Winnie the Pooh. And I think it's probably the best Winnie the Pooh film in my opinion. I've seen the TV show that they did on Disney, whatever, back in the day, and the rutabagas and all that nonsense. I've seen the Tigger film and the Winnie the Pooh film later on. I've pretty much seen everything. But for me, this is the quintessential Winnie the Pooh because the animation lends itself to the storytelling with some great voice acting and really tells different themes throughout and weaves it together in such a way that shouldn't really work, but with expert directing and just compilation from John, I want to get this right, John Loonsberry and Wolfgang Reiter, just really weave this together in such a way that you could watch this all the way through. You could watch this in chunks or segments. Again, the animation department from Mary Poppins, Dumbo, and the Rescuers. So you really got some great names behind what you're doing here. And the animator from the director from Sword in the Stone, which I think is one of the most underrated Disney films. I really appreciate the style, what they were trying to go for. It was different. And again, the director from Robin Hood. So you got me there.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is Wolfgang Reitherman directed everything Disney from 1961 with 101 Dalmatians to 1977, which was Winnie the Pooh and the Rescuers. So everything had that sketchist design, the sketchist design that kind of may have inspired Wolfwalkers, because that was the
Maybe.
term I was trying to come up with, that sketchist
Mhm.
look where all their physical features had those lines that are drawn in. And this one with Winnie the Pooh, it's definitely a lot more polished, but it still has the sketchist texture and the sketchist level of color that makes it stand out, but in a very positive way.
Yeah.
The Winnie the Pooh one that came out in 2011 was a lot more polished. They gave Christopher Robin more humanized instead of those dot ones that made him look kind of ridiculous. And I gotta be honest, I kind of like the 2011 design of him because it just makes him look like a regular person. Everybody else has the dot eyes and they're all his imaginary animal friends. So I felt like that was probably a better choice. Plus, the 2011 one has that everything is honey bit where Pooh just literally imagines everything in his life, every person, every object, every aspect, like he's sailing in a honey ocean. That just shows the level of obsession and the level of selfishness that he tends to have, because when you watch the Winnie the Pooh movies as an adult, you tend to forget a lot of these characters are pretty self-centered in
Yes.
certain ways, but it's them learning their mistakes and them making mistakes in a funny way that just sidesteps all that, thankfully. And the animation is more, it's more fluid to really portray the slapstick. And plus they're stuffed animals, so when they get hurt, you don't feel too bad for them, especially when Pooh gets chased by bees and they have their fun with him. That part always gets me every single time.
That warned me to stay away from bees as a kid and not to rock a bee's nest.
Why
That was an important lesson because I had friends who were like, "Oh, look, let's touch this," and we're like, "No, I saw that in Winnie the Pooh," and they're like, "Wait, oh yeah." Like that really we were like, no, we shouldn't touch that. Winnie the Pooh said, "Don't do that." It was a relatable life lesson.
Winnie the Pooh also said, "Don't touch marijuana."
Well, I'm not familiar with that.
It was that stupid after school bit where it was him, Alvin and the Chipmunks, and every cartoon character like doing the "just say no" bit.
Yeah, I missed.
I can't remember what I can't remember what that special's.
So
I can't remember what it's called, but I never saw it.
Regardless, Winnie the Pooh has a great legacy, and as much I did really enjoy Goodbye Christopher Robin. That was a cute film. I liked it a lot with Ian McGregor in 2017. So
I skipped that one on purpose just because I didn't.
Not mind blowing, but I think this is the best adaptation for the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
100%.
So yeah, that's just me. I'm like, I really like this this version here. Nostalgia, and I've gone back and watched it recently, and there's a lot of films that I watched as a kid that just do not hold up. Yeah. But I think the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh does hold up as a film and as animation. I feel like you could show it to kids today, and it would still have the same impact it had on me in the early '90s. So
totally, yeah. Okay, so this had to have been the most difficult choice on my list because for the longest time, I was actually going to make this list without any computer animated films.
Oh.
I know that sounds horrible.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
For a while, I couldn't think of whether or not to pay attention to Pixar or DreamWorks because Pixar has a lot of movies that I watched over and over again, and based on entertainment value, that alone has kept me coming back. But the animation styles have never been really mind-blowing for me. Same thing with DreamWorks. I just thought, okay, well, I could do Shrek based on the amount of creative designs with the fairy tales, but for me, there weren't that many outside of just how many jokes they can come up with making Pinocchio lie and grow his nose. And I know a lot of people are just like, well, what about How to Train Your Dragon with DreamWorks?
That is a very
they look nice.
Yeah.
But the How to Train Your Dragon movies actually aren't really my thing. So for a while, I was going to put Hunchback in here along with my other 2D choice. But then it actually hit me that the Kung Fu Panda movies actually look pretty stunning when you think about it. Because let's be honest, it's the slapstick and the banter between Jack Black and everybody else that we remember the absolute most. But we tend to forget that the animation lends a lot to creating just about everything that makes these movies fun, just from an action movie standpoint, because animation and action are incredibly hard to do, not just because you have to draw each fight move every single time, but animation costs more than live action. Yes. So there are some fights that you cannot show, which is the part that really pisses me off about anime. Every time they do like a still shot of a character swooping and then they throw in the white line against the black background to do the swoosh, I'm just like, fuck. You guys make the most amount of animation in the world. There is no way you didn't have this much money. You didn't have this much
budget
money.
At the end of the day, if you can make it cheaper, you can make more money.
Yeah, and that part just pisses me off the most. But like, take any fight sequence, and you can see the amount of imagination that goes into the choreography. The fact that the writers never forget that these guys are animals and they move at a different pace and they fight in a different fashion.
Mhm.
And the fights are all incredibly fast paced and energetic that they make my blood pump every time I see them. That intense as hell prison escape where Tai Lung takes just about anything that he can. He takes the arrows from the crossbow and builds a bridge to swing back up. Or when they blow up the bridge, he jumps from block to grab the dynamite and just throw it at them. And he's just so relentless and fearless and so focused. Or the bridge sequence where it's him and the Furious Five, and him and Tigress are fighting on the bottom of the bridge. Their legs are hanging onto the woods, and they're still punching and kicking each other every single way they can. Meanwhile, the the other 3 out of the 5 have to jump in and help, while Mantis is holding on to the rope for dear life as Jackie Chan as the monkey is jumping on it. Viper is sliding around it. Crane is the only one who can fly, so he's not putting any pressure, but it's just insane. He can somehow flip the bridge in order to even out the odds as they just take him on every single way they can. And even from a comedic standpoint, where the fight between Poe and Tai Lung, he uses bamboo trees as not only stilts, but uses them as chopsticks to prevent Tai Lung from getting the scroll, kind of like how Shifu used chopsticks to prevent Poe from getting the last dumpling in that incredibly awesome training montage. It is one of the funniest fight scenes I have ever seen. I can never stop laughing at just how hilarious and energetic and well-timed all of those sequences are. Kung Fu Panda is just proof that there are some things action movies, live action wise, just could never do. But take the action out of it, just focusing on scenes that rely on dialogue and visuals, everything still looks incredibly beautiful. The character designs feel 100% three-dimensional and authentic, especially Master Shifu. He's one of the few characters that actually has clothes from top to bottom, because the majority of the characters are shirtless to the point where you're wondering when they're going to shove Taylor Lautner in at one point. But anyways, he
Dustin
has
Hoffman,
his,
right?
yeah, Dustin Hoffman as Shifu. He has the robe that feels 100% tangible as it's moving around alongside him, and he's got that grown out mustache and beard that physically makes him resemble a grandmaster from any other martial arts movie. So they take the design of the animal and find a way to make it feel familiar, to fit the archetypes that you would associate with a martial arts movie. And on top of that, the environments themselves, the Chinese scenery that they come up with that's up to par with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, are just gorgeous. The mountainsides have those misty clouds that like bulk up halfway through that just feel so majestic and calming. That really awesome training montage where Poe is covered in a silhouette. He's fighting alongside the sunset as he's perfected his technique. It feels incredibly badass, and as he puts it, is just absolutely awesome. And there's just Kung Fu Panda is proof that computer animated movies have so much more visual style and artistic merit than people tend to give them credit for. And there are just so many shots, so many moments, especially when Master Oogway decides that his time has come and he slowly ascends into the night sky with all these beautiful stars in the background. And in the foreground, the petals of the trees just completely shroud him as he disappears. And it felt, that scene alone felt so somber based on the way they used the imagery and the way they used the environment around them. And they pulled absolutely no punches. I mean, the Furious Five are literally different styles of Kung Fu, Tiger Kung Fu, Crane Kung Fu. The writers definitely put decent amount of research into it, and the animators kept up with them as much as they possibly can. And the best part is, with the fight scenes, you can actually see how fast-paced and energetic everything is. You can see how creative everything is because they hold it in a steady wide shot, because animation does not believe in handheld, shaky camera work.
No, which is nice.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I've seen Kung Fu Panda once, and it didn't really do a lot for me. But same with How to Train Your Dragon. And there's a reason behind this, not because the movies aren't beautiful in animation. My best friend Ben loves certain animated movies more than others. One of those being Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon. So what would we watch? Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon. So I've never even seen Kung Fu Panda 2 because I literally seen the first one so many darn times at this point. It's either that or we watch Megamind, or it's like there's no creativity in that. Like there are so many animated movies out there. I think he only likes 5 sometimes.
I had that
So
feeling
yeah,
when
for
you
me it's
guys. I
overplay.
had
But
that feeling when you guys were
I will
skimming
say
through
that
them.
Jack Black is perfectly cast in this.
Oh, 100%.
A great casting there, and I like Angelina Jolie as the tiger.
He's the one side character that really does anything outside of Dustin Hoffman, which you'd think if you get Jackie Chan to be a martial arts master, you'd give him a few jokes, but then again, he'd have to be able to tell those jokes.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why people like him. I just overplay has killed it for me.
That's fair.
My number 2 or whatever, I think. I don't know where we at. That's just what my list says here. One movie I particularly love, I was excited for. I watched it. I bought the special edition when it came out, until the only Blu-ray that worked was the 3D Blu-ray because I played it so darn much. I love the Lego Movie. The Lego Movie for me, animation wise, not only does it tell a really fun, lighthearted story that this movie should not have been good. No. Product movies should not be good. I mean, let's go down the product movies. There's a Playmobil movie. I mean, even like Ken and Barbie and Toy Story 3 just didn't work for me as well as it should have. Just like product placement should not be a film. No. But for some reason, Phil Lord and Chris Miller said, you know what? It can be. And they made the Lego Movie. The animation here is like they did the basic scanning of the Lego and put it on screen, and then computer generated it and tells this story of the master builder in such a way. Particularly, I want to highlight the origin, the way they like show him falling down a hole after singing "Everything Is Awesome" on a construction site, and he finds the piece. The what are they? I forget what the exact term it is, but it's like the piece that can fix everything. And it's crazy, like the way they do this. Sort of, they use the holographic or the see-through orange bricks to create this sort of like little version of Lego hell where it's been hiding all this all along. The world itself is particularly engaging with all the different housing sets and such, and they just get to go along, and you get to see this sort of place come to life. The animation is surprisingly fluent. It's not as blocky as it could be. It could be this blocky, chunky thing, but they really had, at this point, Lego Studios had perfected the frame rate of animation and how to do it. Because as I mentioned, there's a lot of direct to Lego movies. Probably the finest example of this being the Padawan Menace. They had a couple Star Wars spin-off ones where you got the figures. So, you get a little Yoda when you bought it. And they really had perfected, because they had done about 15, 20 of these things, and they put them up on the Lego website, and you could buy them for $15 on Blu-ray with a figure. But then they came along and they made this. And by this point, practice had made them so the animation looked great. So now all you needed was a wonderful script, some funny quips, a catchy song to make your kids sing forever, which I don't know if I'm a fan of anymore. But the fact is, you made a Lego movie and you grabbed the Lonely Island and said, you know what? Dick in a box, guys, make a song for kids. That's a good idea. Yeah.
I had no idea it was them.
Yeah, those guys. They're like, yeah, it's okay in a 3 with Lady Gaga. You guys make a song for the Lego Movie. And for some reason, I mean, it works really well. Yeah, stepped in mud, got new brown shoes, got nothing to win, I got nothing to lose. Like, it's just the most vague song in the history of songs. And then I love for the sequel how they're like, you know who we need? We need Garfunkel and Oates to remix it for the sequel and do an acoustic ukulele version. Like, they picked the most irreverent acts to do this. But then the way you get to see all the different Lego kingdoms, and I think the waves are particularly impressive when they're on the pirate ship, because those waves are all Lego. They're all computer generated, but they just move and it flows really, really nicely. And the double-decker bed is one of the best gags I think I've ever seen in film history. I know that's putting the double-decker bed way up there, but that thing makes me laugh every single time I see it.
Okay.
But it's good animation. He's just so excited. He's jumping around and he's just like, boom, boom, boom. It's like that high-level energy that Chris Pratt, they took that energy of Chris Pratt and put it into a Lego figure. You could, if you told me that Chris Pratt was a Lego person and Lego people did exist, I would believe you. Because he feels like he fits perfectly in there. I mean, he's unrecognizable in Parks and Rec most for me these days. Because I watch it and I'm like, really? That's Chris Pratt? Well, sort of. Does he have a brother? He's now this high energy person to me. And then again, I love this movie so much. I'm tripping over my words, like you mentioned. But we get to see the alternate reality for, I think it's like a minute or two with Will Ferrell there, which is a really interesting casting choice. And this whole city and everything about it is just perfectly put together. Wild Style is really, really fun the way her hair animates, because her hair should not move, but her hair just sort of animates with the wind and such. And then you get an invasion of Duplo at the end where they're combining animation styles. And I just think this level of creativity that they bring, the building sequences where they have to build whatever they want to be creative to take down the forces of fitting into a perfect little box, is very well done when they're just building whatever they want and they want to put pirate ships and Benny gets to build his spaceship and they get to like construct all these things. Again, they do use a little bit of speed frame rating, but we'd be sitting there forever if they were building that in slow motion. So this movie's just particularly beautiful in animation because it shouldn't work. It shouldn't be a movie that people think that's a good movie for kids. They should be like, oh, it's on YTV, whatever. We'll put it on the background. The kids won't care. They'll forget about it. But it's so well done because of the direction, because of the animation, but mostly because it's flawless execution of taking that animation and using it to create a different medium. And then market those toys. They marketed the Lego line, and I'm like, they really knew what they were doing when they made this. Everyone else jumping on the bandwagon. No, you didn't. Lego had a plan. They've been working on this for years. They're like, if we do this and this, and we can sell these creative things, we probably have these parts in the factory and too much, and this is cheap to produce, so we can promote it. And then you put out a video game that feels exactly like the movie, because obviously it's going to feel exactly like the movie. You know exactly what you're doing marketing wise. You know exactly what you're doing. Lego's sort of a genius when it comes to marketing their products. So
true.
Yeah, but beautiful animation in the Lego movie.
Oh, absolutely. Again, you've basically narrowed down everything great about this and everything great about the other sequels, because I kind of prefer Lego Batman over
Lego Batman does have a lot of
mostly based on the sense of humor and the fact that they shove in every dumb Batman villain that no one's ever heard of, every dumb Batman feature that no one who's ever heard of Adam West has never understood, like the Bat Shark repellent, which they use against King Shark, which that's actually pretty brilliant. I can't believe I hadn't thought of that, but
I mean, hey, yeah, that's the 80s live action Batman. The fact that Eggman is in there, I like that Eggman is in there. That was Vincent Price, stupid villain. Even the Lego Movie Part 2, it's not as good as Part 1. It still has a lot of great animation and some great moments and just really good characters and humor. And I love that Wild Style wrote the Everything is Awesome song.
It's funny you should mention the fact that Lonely Island made this, because I mean, the 2011 Winnie the Pooh, the songs were written by the same guy who did give us Let It Go, but he also gave us Casa Diga Ibawai from Book of Mormon, and songs like Everyone's a Little Bit Racist, The Internet is for Porn, among many others from Avenue Q, one of my favorite Broadway musicals.
I guess they did in Wreck-It Ralph, which is a charming film. Not my favorite, but it's still charming. They did put Sarah Silverman in there, which is
Look, adult comics can do kids roles. I mean, Gilbert Gottfried's been doing it forever. George Carlin, I'm not kidding. George Carlin narrated the Thomas the Tank Engine TV show.
Really? That was him?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
In fact, he was going to be Scrooge in Muppet Christmas Carol, and if I'm being honest, it should have been him instead of Michael Caine.
That would be awesome. I mean, they did have whatever her name, Joan. Oh, the comedian.
I'm sure Joan Rivers shows up.
Joan Rivers was in the Muppets Take Manhattan as a terrible makeup guru at a counter. It was fantastic. So,
but yeah, like little details like that. Like offensive comics do kids stuff all the time just because it suits them. I mean, don't forget Bob Saget in Full House. Or actually, let's forget that. Let's just forget that happened.
Okay. Do you like Full House? What do you think?
No.
Okay, good. Because I feel like I'm in the minority here because I think
We are, and it makes no sense.
because I think Full House is not a very good show. I think it has moments, some decent jokes, and there's a few good casting calls in there. I think Jesse is well cast and Rebecca, and I'll give it
That's
to
not saying
Joey.
much.
But I don't really like Bob Saget in it. The Olsen twins, I don't care. I really don't care.
I don't hate them, but like,
but then
just,
Stephanie is like one of the most irritating characters of all time because she's like a giant cliche and never learns anything. And
the less you talk about it, the better.
Her whole like it feels like a bad catchphrase comedy, but without heart.
Yeah, because it is.
And then like
there's an 8-year-old, I hated
it. And then they rebooted it for Netflix, but I'm like, why? No one cares.
Not even the same people.
Who's watching Fuller House?
I don't know.
Like, I mean, maybe nostalgia from the 90s in your childhood, but like,
totally nostalgia.
Like, if I'm going to watch a 90s sitcom, I will rewatch Fresh Prince because it still has some really good jokes. The laugh track's a little distracting, but there's some good stuff in there. Like, there's some really good stuff.
Yeah.
Just doesn't hit me. Anyway, what do you got? What else?
Let's just man, we have taken forever.
We'll say this as Batman says, first try.
Yeah, sure. There's that.
This was our first try to get to the number one.
For my last pick, it is obviously a Disney pick. And there were definitely a lot that I could have chose for a variety of different reasons, but I chose Tarzan as the most beautiful looking Disney movie because I think it's one of the most recent examples where they took full advantage of what you could do with animation. You can put the characters in the camera any place, anywhere, as long as you want. You can draw them in so many expressive ways that some professional pantomimes could never do because their face doesn't stretch that far. So long as you know exactly what to do with these characters and you do something incredibly imaginative that's entertaining and suits the story equally. Now, that was more than 20 years ago, so take that however you will, but it's the first Disney movie I think of whenever somebody asks me, where just seeing two characters give a distant look at each other and it can instantly sum up what they're feeling in a given moment. And weirdly enough, half of these characters are gorillas. The first 10 minutes alone actually doesn't have any dialogue unless you count the Phil Collins song playing in the montage, which I don't, because it still sets up the established relationship between Tarzan's family and the tribe of apes without them even realizing it, because they do have the shared family tragedy of losing certain individuals to the exact same cheetah, which is bookended in the scene, the official opening anyways, where Kala, who is played very well by Glenn Close, discovers Tarzan in the first place. She hears the baby crying, and of course it just reminds her of the fact that she has already lost her cub. So she decides, just for the hell of it, to check out this cabin that Tarzan's parents built. And she doesn't instantly walk into it. She opens the door, she looks around, and the camera and the editing takes a few seconds to let her like really soak in what she's looking at. The fact that it just feels so unfamiliar to her. She doesn't just barge in. She very slowly crawls on the floor, and we see what she's crawling against, especially this open shotgun with a couple of bullets to make it clear that something did go down. And then she pauses to look at the fact that she sees two sets of legs and some red paw prints that are very reminiscent of the same cheetah that she lost her baby to. So she makes it clear that's the exact same thing that happened. And it's enough reason for her to get the hell out until she steps on a picture. And out of complete curiosity, she picks up the picture, sees the dynamic of the parents and baby Tarzan to realize this was a family the exact same way she had one. So when she finally discovers Tarzan hidden among the wreckage, how he made it out of there, I'm not sure, but details. And they lighten the mood by having the two of them look at each other in very weird animalistic ways, and they embrace in a way by holding each other's hands. The motives are already established for why she decides to keep him, despite the fact that the apes in this movie technically don't talk. All the dialogue between Tarzan and the apes, he's actually making ape noises, but because that would get annoying after a while, they decided not to go that route, which I understand, but the movie didn't do a good job at explaining that. But in any case, the holding of hands actually becomes a huge visual metaphor for Tarzan's inner conflict. The fact that he's constantly questioning his roots and the tribe is questioning his input within the other members just based on the fact that he's completely different. When he makes that incredibly huge mistake with the elephants in the pool, there's that moment where Kala has to calm him down. She has to point out, yes, I am looking at you, and I see two eyes, I see a nose somewhere in that mud. Oh, there it is. Two ears, and then it's just like two hands. Yes, two hands, but they put the hands together. They're bigger. There's fur on one, on the other, and then they're just reminded of the fact that yeah, he's different, and they have to listen to each other's hearts to kind of put their minds at ease and settle with the fact that yeah, we all have a heart, which yeah, metaphor, themes, messages, ha ha. But then he finally meets Jane for the first time, and he's examining her because he has seen her alongside the other group of humans, and he was obviously shaken about it, but he was also curious because, gee, there are other people like me. I should definitely check this out. And then he notices a hole within her glove, so he takes it off and sees the hand is almost exactly like his, and he presses it against hers, and he just feels so shocked and surprised, but in a very low-key way. He's very relieved that he's not alone in the world, and we get this great close-up of his eyes zeroing in on Jane because he feels as if he finally can establish a connection with someone. And it's established through that chase sequence, which is so phenomenally well done. The action scenes are absolutely insane. It has that Kung Fu Panda level of quality where they do things that live action could never do. There's that incredibly swift long take of the fact that Tarzan can swing, surf, glide on just about every tree branch or vine you could possibly imagine. There's a POV of him going like sideways, backwards, upside down for all these tree branches that again feels like a roller coaster ride. It feels absolutely exhilarating. And I found out that the way that they blended in the two-dimensional characters with these very lush and beautiful green CGI backgrounds was through this computer software known as Deep Canvas, oddly enough. And it would end up being used on Treasure Planet and Atlantis to establish the tracking shots of all the ships and all those beautiful action sequences. Some of them might be a little bit more entertaining on that level, but here it's just so visually impressive because they're done in longer takes. They really love to show off the fact that Tarzan has acquired so many skills over the years as he tries to not necessarily act like an ape, but contribute in any way he can in a unique fashion. I didn't say this, but the Deep Canvas actually ended up winning a technical achievement award at the Oscars because it was so pioneering, and for damn good reason. And I can go on and on about this, and I probably have. My original review is actually 11 minutes, but the animation was phenomenal. For a while, this was the most expensive animated movie in the world at $130 million, but they did not waste any penny because it looks fantastic, even though the elephants are red for some reason.
Yeah, I you mentioned a lot. I do like the sequence where they're sneaking around the camp. That's really fun. And
Trash in the Camp is the best song in the movie for me personally. And it's just Rosie O'Donnell spouting out gibberish. Really say that.
And then I also appreciate the tech. You said the long shots there, but the way the vines look when he slides through to Phil Collins looks incredible.
Everything
I have seen before.
Everything looks 100% tangible. The sweeping camera movements are very reminiscent of Hunchback or Beauty and the Beast, where it really feels as if they're in the environment alongside with the characters. And they do something a lot more suspenseful, even though it's only for a few seconds. They'll have characters wait for something to happen, and then it jumps out kind of like a jump scare, but because something legitimately threatening is happening. I mean, they're in the jungle after all. It does fit. Like the opening sequence where she does find Tarzan, she also has to escape the cabin because for whatever reason the cheetah is still there and is still hungry, even though he didn't actually eat the parents. He just
I guess not.
killed them.
Just didn't like him. He was upset.
Plot details, I'm not entirely sure, but either way, Tarzan ends up avenging his parents' death and the baby gorilla's death without even acknowledging it, which I mentioned that in my review. That just feels weird, but it also feels original. It wasn't about revenge. It was just about self-defense for once.
To me, it felt like a better version of what the Jungle Book could have been, because the Jungle Book has some charming sequences, but it felt a little scattered in the way it was put together. Tarzan felt very whole from beginning to end, like they were telling one story in the jungle, and it was like you could have put Baloo in there as a side character and it would have fit. Not that I would want that, but you could, and it felt like of all the Disney jungle stories, this feels the most complete.
Well, for one, they actually focus on the main character. The big problem with the original is that Mowgli doesn't really have an arc. It's just a road trip movie where it's about observing the moment, kind of like how Alice in Wonderland doesn't technically have an arc.
Alice in Wonderland is a drug trip, and it's great.
It's okay. I mean, it definitely is a drug trip.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, but a good pick for Tarzan. I didn't put it on my honorable mentions because I figured you were going to pick it.
Very wise choice. But yeah, it's the official last movie in the Disney Renaissance, just based on the fact that from Emperor's New Groove to Home on the Range, well, I said Home on the Range. You know exactly what went wrong.
Emperor's New Groove has some charming moments. I don't think it's visually stunning with animation, but it's not a bad watch. Honestly, I had fun watching it. So,
well, don't get me wrong, like it's good, but from New Groove to Home on the Range, they were mostly original concepts. They weren't based on anything. Meanwhile, the original concepts that were computer animated, for whatever reason, had better story and better characters, and it was just the bad timing that has sunk the animation industry partly, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's still a lot of good stuff, but Tarzan's a great pick. The one that I think is the most interesting and probably the most beautiful, the most worked, the most hard-earned, this is not your traditional animation. This is a biopic. So in 2017, they came out with a film called Loving Vincent. Now, if you're familiar with Vincent van Gogh, he's an artist. He was an impressionist, a French painter. And they wanted to tell the story of his life through an autobiographical film. So in 2008, they started off with a 7-minute short. Then the following year, they got some funding and they shot an entire movie. So 2009, we have an entire movie all about Vincent van Gogh's life. But then they said, you know what? This is what we're going to do. We're going to spend the next 6-7 years hand painting every frame with 125 artist teams from across the world to create a hand painted autobiography that's almost completely silent, visual storytelling, because there's a painter, and do it in such a way that everyone's going to talk about it. There's a few risks and rewards that pay off when you try to make a movie over time. I'll say that when you make a trilogy over time, sometimes the last one in your entry, many trilogies can feel a little tired, old, or this. Or if you are Richard Linklater and you want to make Boyhood, it's artistic, but not necessarily the best film in the world. Still very artistic and unique. But I think Loving Vincent nails this sort of time lapse, the way it tells the story of his life. But it's all painted, and every painting, every scene feels different, but it feels whole because they all take different themes from his various paintings. They start off with your Starry Night style, but then you'll jump to a different style from another one of his paintings. They'll use the colors. They'll use a fluid blue, reds and oranges to flow throughout this film to create one of the most interesting biopics that you will ever see in your life. You really sort of just have to see this movie. There's no way to describe it that I haven't already because it's gorgeous. I think it would have been very well received if they did a live action version and they put it out in 2009, 2010, because it does take time to make a film. But the poster, the thing, I'm like, okay, well, let's see what's coming out this year, right? 2017, looking at films. I see this poster of hand-painted Vincent van Gogh, and all I know is he painted Starry Night, he cut off his ear, and I'm like, okay, well, that could be interesting because I like learning new things, and an autobiographical piece could be pretty neat. And this is a European film. You can definitely see the influence of art from Europe and such. And I don't think anyone saw this but me. I'm going to be honest.
I know a few people have seen it.
It's not as well known as I think it should be because it is animation. It's hand painted. Every single frame is hand painted. That sounds like a pain. If I had to paint a movie for 7 years, no. You better pay me some good money because I ain't working on the same film for 7 years and hand painting it. But just the artistic level behind this, like directors create a film and say, okay, I'm going to edit it and put it out, and there's a soundtrack, and maybe if it's a Marvel movie, they're like, yeah, we'll sell some toys, or if it's claymation, they'll enter some festivals and people will give it acclaim. But the fact that you hand painted this is insane. But it also is the magnificence. It's the beauty of this masterpiece where they're like, haha, look what we did. Just every character in this film gets 10 or 12 different distinctive looks, where if you have a police constable or someone at a cafe or a farmer, where they could be hand painted in a way that looks very realistic, then it could be impressionist, then it could be limited color, then it could be obscured background where the background's more important than the character. Then you have this sort of a French modernist style where it's sort of this strange alternate ego version of yourself with different alternate lines and such, but still all very Van Gogh. The mustaches, the hair, and all of this has this very unique style for every single character. And the credits shows you every single artist that painted every single frame and the different ways they were painted for the people that were starring in it. And everyone gets maybe 2 or 3 scenes because his life is, again, he lived 70 plus years, I believe, off the top of my head. But you get every character gets 2 or 3 different looks.
Oh, wow. He was young.
Yeah. I don't know how long he lived.
Dude was only 37.
Oh, okay, well, 37.
Older.
But
Wow.
he left an impression and an impressionist painting style. One of the most unique, it's the most unique animated films you'll ever see, except for maybe Wolfwalkers. That's a close up there for uniqueness, or Song of the Sea, or one of those cartoon saloon films, because I mean, you see a lot of anime and you see a lot of CG and you see claymation, but you really do not see anything like this. I've never seen anything like this. So for me, it goes to number 1 because there's so much artistic integrity to work for so long on making this a thing. And then to have it be as good as you imagine it to be, incredible. Yeah.
For sure. And
loving Vincent.
I mean, it's not the first movie about Vincent Van Gogh, and nor would it have been the last.
No.
I think the most recent one was At Eternity's Gate, where Willem Dafoe played him, and people
that
seem
was
to really
okay.
enjoy that.
It was okay. I think that movie suffered from heavy shaky cam. They wanted to like move the camera constantly so you could feel this sense of movement for the brush, and it worked at some points, but not every point. At points, it felt like you should be watching a boring movie about painting.
I've only seen bits of it, but I did notice the handheld thing to try to highlight just how rough his last few years were, which that I can definitely understand. Plus, is it just me, or were they a little too obsessed with close-up shots every now and then?
There was one called Vincent, strictly Vincent. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like there are friends of my sister who actually did see Loving Vincent because they were big into art, and my sister loves going to art museums whenever she gets the chance. Usually trips to New York with my dad, which I mean, as soon as the borders are open, that'll probably be one of the first things I end up doing.
Well, we'll see when that happens. But regardless, there's a lot of Vincent Van Gogh films. This is obviously the finest because it pays the most respect to his work, and the live action ones have their charms, but this is the coolest thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's insane. Like the poster legitimately looks like his self-portrait.
Yep.
It literally looks like his face. And the fact that 65,000 frames of oil painting.
Yes,
that is just wow.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they got paid to do this, but obviously not enough.
Well, I'll look up the budget here.
Oh, it's not much. Oh, wow, that's really not much.
Budget $5.5 million, yeah.
But I mean, worth it.
100%.
Oh shit, and it was actually a hit.
Yes, they made a lot of money.
42 million. That's really good.
Yeah, we played it at the Princess for literally like 6 months. People just wouldn't stop coming to see this. We get 10, 15
I was one of
people
the
a show.
I was one of the
it
few
got
people
decent attendance. I don't know how many people asked me to buy the poster. They're like, "Is the poster for sale?" I'm like, "No, we're still playing the film." And they're like, well, when it's done, I'm like, well, I don't know when it's done. You have to ask me when the film's done. Like, and they're like, well, the movie was so good. I'm like, look,
I know.
I'm just the guy who plays the movie, so chill. Like the most requested poster in Princess Cinema history.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Incredible film. But yeah, lots of great animations. Thank you, Keegan, Splice Knight, for the topic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. It's nice when someone else picks a topic for you. I'm okay with it.
He started off going off about cinematography and animation, and I just went, okay, well, we can narrow that down to most beautiful looking.
There's a lot of topics we should cover, but don't know we should cover, and then people just suggest them, and this is one of them. So,
yeah, which really makes me wonder what the hell we're gonna do next week.
I mean, I have an idea, and we'll discuss this after the show, obviously, real quick. But yeah, great show, Tyler.
Thank you.
Great show. We talked for a little bit about animation here. Our shows are getting longer because we're getting more passionate, which is not a bad thing, but it's a long thing.
Well, it is if you have to hold in your bladder, but
fair enough. Well, Tyler with 2 S for fun, fantastic, fucking F things. I don't know. My brain is gone. Where can we find you? What reviews do you have up?
Well, right now I have reviews up for the Corruption of Divine Providence. This is such a forgettable movie. I keep forgetting the title. And I feel embarrassed about that because I went to the studio and said, hey, can I review this for you guys? Because there was a 30-second trailer and it interested me. And it had Hallmark actors who prove that they actually have acting chops. So there's that. And there's also a review up for the documentary Street Gang, How We Got to Sesame Street, even though it's been 52 years and we still don't fucking know how to get there. My Uber driver has no idea what I'm talking about. Exhausting. But yeah, definitely check those reviews out. I'm still figuring out what my next review is going to be. It'll either be for a Korean movie from last month called Night in Paradise, which is on Netflix, or it'll be from the new VOD release Together, a rom-com starring Ed Helms.
Okay, well, Ed Helms could be charming. He's hit and miss in movies, so you never know.
Very hit and miss.
Because he's good in Horrible Bosses, but bad in Vacation. You know, like you get what you get.
Excruciating in Vacation.
But he's fun in The Hangover, so you get it's hit and miss. He's good. Just you don't know what you're gonna get there. Anyway, check out all our shows on Sharp Edge, Cinematics, Community Cast, Suits and Cinema, The Nonsense Show, which you can see Tyler on, The Josh and Tyler Show, which you're watching now. If you want to check out our other episodes, our documentary episode is particularly passionate. We like documentaries.
One of the best that we've ever
Melissa
made.
versus Classic Clips. June 5th, we've got my feature film debut, Saving Grace, coming out there with its psychological horror vibes. Lots of great stuff coming your way. And Chance Encounters on the Improv Kind. Check out Tyler and myself there every Monday night. Thanks for joining us on the show. If I was an animated character, I'd probably be like the cheetah, the thing, or whatever, that thing that likes donuts in Zootopia, because I like donuts. Tyler, say something awesome.
2D animation is better than CG, and I will say that any other day.
I agree. All right. See you next time, folks, on the Josh and Tyler Show.